Story 1. Husband left me and our baby to find himself and said he'll never come back. Vanishing with all our savings. Weeks later, he's back wanting to be a family again. I am feeling rather conflicted about a decision I have made regarding my family, so I would like to know everyone's opinion on whether I am right or wrong about this. To start with, my life turned upside down 4 weeks ago when my husband, Dave, suddenly announced one evening that he was leaving me and our daughter. This announcement came out of nowhere, and nothing could have prepared me for that moment. I was completely blindsided and lost. You see, Dave was the love of my life. I had always been gaga over him since the first day I had met him at a friend's party. He was 100% my type. We eventually became friends and then started dating when we realized that our attraction was mutual. Getting into a relationship with him was easy, but the only thing that was missing from our relationship was sex. Right from the beginning, Dave had a laid-back approach when it came to intimacy and would hardly initiate romance in any way. I was less experienced than him, so this nonchalant attitude of his would make me question if he even found me attractive at all. Each time, he would assure me that he did, but would then come up with excuses like he was too tired after work. What really bugged me was that he would eye other women when we were out in public, so this wasn't like he wasn't attracted to women. Our physical connection was infrequent, happening maybe every 6 weeks, turning our relationship into more of a close friendship with occasional romantic moments. Though the scarcity did leave me wanting more, I held my tongue due to my love for him and my fear of making him feel uneasy by discussing this again and again. I convinced myself that, with his experience, he would take the lead if he wanted more intimacy, so I decided to accept our situation as it was. It's important to note that Dave suffered from depression after his dad passed away when he was in college, so he was on medication which might have been resulting in his low libido, or so I thought. Unlike our physical connection, Dave heavily relied on me emotionally. He was an introvert and never really shared a lot of personal things about his life with his friends. But when I came into his life, this changed. He started opening up to me about his childhood, his dad, and the family. I was happy to support him and be there for him in whatever way that I could. When I met his mother, Martha, for the first time, she was quick to notice this and gushed to me later how it had been years since she had seen her son so happy. Although we had a great 4 years of dating before he finally proposed to me, we did have a few hiccups where I had caught him texting other women. Sometimes, the incident that stands out is when I once caught him talking to his ex-girlfriend about us during the initial months of our dating. His ex-girlfriend, Sonia, had been caught cheating on Dave with his friend, Foz. Dave had left her despite her apologies, but Sonia would still try to get back together with him. I remember how she would text him a lot in the initial days of our flirting, and Dave would tell me that it was his ex's turn to grovel and that he would never ever be with a cheater like her. This is why it shocked me when I went through their chats and saw that he had been complaining about me, my job, my weight, my looks, and my cooking, among other things, to Sonia. Sonia had, of course, initiated all the conversations by telling him how she was better looking than me, but Dave, instead of defending me and blocking her, had kind of agreed to her. He had written long paragraphs about how I was definitely not his type and how he preferred women like Sonia, but since Sonia cheated on him, he had decided to settle with someone like me. Sonia had used derogatory comments about my belly, double chin, and back by using words like how I look like a penguin. As you can imagine, I was utterly shocked and disgusted reading their chats. To clarify, I am not and I have never been overweight. I go for yearly visits to the doctor and work out whenever I can. It's true I was not overly fit like Isaac, who used to play volleyball for her college, but there was no reason for them to talk about me this way. Their entire interaction wasn't flirty in any way, but all they talked about was me and how much they both disliked my looks. There was even a picture of me in a dress which I had worn for a friend's wedding, and Dave had sent it to my ex saying, "You would look much better than her in this dress," and she had gleefully agreed. I was at a loss for words and broke down crying that night when Dave returned home. I confronted him about the chats, and his face went white as a sheet. He immediately went down on his knees and apologized for how wrong he was to do this. I told him, while crying, that he could have just talked to me about this if he wasn't attracted to me, and we could have broken up without any drama. But Dave started pleading, saying how he loves me from my heart and that he couldn't survive without me. He continued to tell me how, even though I was not his ideal type when it came to looks, I was still the person he wanted to be with. I was ready to leave that night, but his crying and groveling changed my mind. I hate how much I used to love him because, despite all these clear red flags, I thought this man would eventually change to appreciate me for who I am. After this conversation, I asked Dave to block his ex, and he agreed, promising me that he would never talk to her again. This, coupled with a few other minor incidents like when I found him chatting with random women on dating apps in the second year of our relationship, and he quickly apologized and deleted the apps, were the only ever hiccups in our dating life. In the months leading up to Dave proposing to me, he seemed to have changed, and we were the happiest, which is why I didn't think twice before saying yes to him. Since our marriage, we seemed to have had a better and more fulfilling relationship. We were consistently intimate with each other, and he would tell me every day how much he loved me. We loved cuddling and watching movies or sleeping together on the weekends. Eventually, I got pregnant with Cece. Initially, Dave wasn't happy about the pregnancy since he was scared about our finances and was worried if we would be able to afford living with a baby. But I reassured him that I would get back to my job after my maternity leave so we could still afford our lifestyle. Dave's mother and my parents were there for us after I gave birth to Cece and have been a huge help when it comes to babysitting on the days that both of us have to work. Although Dave hasn't always been a present father and hardly helps out with her, I have never once pressured him into thinking he would eventually come around. The only good thing about him was that he would help me out with chores around the house, even if he had a tiring day at work, unlike other husbands that I have heard of from my friends, which is why I never for once imagined that the day would come when he would want to leave me and Cece. Dave had been acting distant and strange for weeks leading up to the revelation, but I had brushed it off as work-related stress. We had been together for a long time and had stuck by each other through thick and thin, so I thought he would eventually get better. But 4 weeks ago, Dave finally confessed that he couldn't live with us anymore and wanted to go away somewhere far to find himself. At first, I thought he was joking because this couldn't seriously be something a sane married man would say to their family with a newborn baby. But Dave continued to say how living with us was making him question the meaning and purpose of his life and how he was done with this charade. Every word he spoke cut through me like a knife, and I felt a mixture of anger and despair swirling in my stomach. He continued to reassure me that he still loved us, but he couldn't deny what he was feeling any longer, and that if he continued to live with us, then he would just get more and more frustrated every day. I asked him point blank if he had been taking his medications on time, and he got very angry hearing that, since I thought this was a result of his depression. If this had been the case, then we could have gone for counseling to help him feel better. But Dave started shouting at me about how I and Cece were the cause of his depression and how living with us had made him hate his life. I froze hearing the hate and disgust in his words. Out of nowhere, he started accusing me of baby-trapping him, which was absolutely ridiculous because he didn't pay a single cent for Cece. I earned significantly more than him and paid almost 80% of our bills, including taking care of Cece since he had a minimum wage job. How could I baby-trap him when he didn't have any money to begin with? When I pointed this out, Dave said how he thought having a daughter would fix his life, but he has since realized that he didn't want this life anymore. I was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions, unable to make sense of what was happening, and it felt like the walls of our home were closing in on me. My voice quivered as I asked him directly if he was planning on leaving me to take care of our daughter, and he nodded slowly, saying how I'm the mother, so Cece should be my responsibility. I sat there in shock as he continued to say how, although he didn't expect me to understand, he needed to do this for himself. He had given it a lot of thought, and he was going to start a new life far away from us where he could be himself. The world came crashing down around me. I just couldn't believe that my husband was leaving me and our infant child. My first instinct was to scream, to plead, to do anything to make him stay, but I looked at his face, and I knew that he had already made his choice, and there was no turning back. That night, he didn't even sleep next to me in bed and went downstairs to sleep on the sofa. This was the first time we had slept apart from each other, so I knew that he was serious and had given this a lot of thought. Dave moved out the following week, leaving me to explain to everyone that Dave had left us. When I first told my family about Dave leaving, they had the same reaction as me. They just couldn't understand why on earth my husband and boyfriend of so many years would do something like this. My parents immediately wanted me to pursue this legally, but at that point in my life I felt numb and shattered, so I needed some time to let this sink in. Dave's mother was utterly broken when I gave her the news. She called him multiple times, pleading with him to return to us, but he told her the same story about how he needed to find himself. Everyone was quite worried about him since they all thought this was a result of his depression, but the way he was behaving seemed like he had given this a lot of thought. 2 days after Dave had left, I discovered that he had also emptied our entire savings account while I was out grocery shopping for the house, and our card declined. I was shocked, and when I went to check my balance, I discovered that the account had been wiped clean. My first thought was that someone had hacked into our account, but later I discovered that it was Dave who had taken out all the money. This joint account had money that I earned as well, and Dave had taken out everything without even discussing it with me. I was furious and shocked. I had to call my parents for help, and thankfully my dad came to my rescue. He then drove me back to my place while I was worried sick about how I would be paying the rent that month and taking care of other bills. This is when my dad made me sit down and told me very seriously that I needed to move on from Dave and look at the reality of the situation. He pointed out how my husband had knowingly wiped the account clean without discussing it with me and left me and my child to starve. Watching Cece look at me with her beautiful blue eyes is when the fog slowly started lifting from my eyes. I finally understood what Dave had done to us. Had it not been for my dad, my child would not even have clean diapers to wear or food to eat. For the first time in my life, I had someone other than myself to think about, and my dad was right. Cece deserved better than this. I made up my mind that I would be visiting the lawyer's office with my dad the very next day so I could start the divorce procedure. My parents, who I will always be thankful for, offered to let me move in with them and stay in their basement so I could have some privacy while taking care of Cece and also get my life in order. I couldn't believe it, but at the age of 32, I had zero money left and a child to take care of, thanks to my poor judgment of choosing a pathetic man like Dave. As you can imagine, I wanted to mentally break down, but for Cece, I tried to keep it together. I had never reached rock bottom this way and felt lost. I had to take a few days off from work so I could shift to my parents' place and get everything in order. Eventually, days passed, and my family and friends rallied around us, offering me support and a shoulder to lean on. My parents would babysit Cece whenever they could, and Dave's mother, Martha, would come to visit. Once my lawyer had drafted the divorce papers, I wanted to mail the divorce papers to Dave, but he seemed to have changed his number, and I had no idea how to get in touch with him. Hence, I decided to talk to Martha and ask her if she knew where her son was. Martha broke down when she found out that I was divorcing Dave. She started to tell me how she had never imagined that this day would come and beg me to reconsider, but my parents backed my decision. I reassured Martha that she would always have a place in Cece's life regardless of my divorce and asked her to inform Dave about this. I wanted to get done with this divorce since all the papers and custody agreement had been prepared, and we could then move on from all this. Martha, still weeping, begrudgingly agreed to pass on the message to Dave. Last week, I received a call from an unknown number. I was at work, so I ignored the call, but in the evening, I received a call from the same number again. This time, I picked up, and to my surprise, it was Dave on the other end of the line. He tentatively told me hello while I was speechless to hear his voice after 4 weeks. He hesitated before telling me that Martha had talked with him about my decision and that he wanted to meet me urgently to discuss a few things. I firmly told him that anything he wanted to discuss he could talk to my lawyer, but Dave started pleading that he just had to see me. I was confused, so I asked him to clarify, but Dave was being very dodgy. He kept repeating how we needed to have this conversation and that it was really important. His repeated pleas were difficult to ignore, so I took a moment to gather my thoughts and finally agreed to meet with him alone, albeit cautiously. The rendezvous was set, and we decided to meet at a cafe near my parents' place. As I hung up the call, a whirlwind of questions and uncertainties filled my mind, leaving me anxious about meeting him. I decided not to tell my parents anything until after I met him to see what the discussion he kept talking about was. I knew my dad would literally murder Dave if he got his hands on him. On the day of our meeting, I arrived early, nervously sipping my coffee as I waited for Dave. It wasn't long before he walked in, approaching me with a mix of hesitation and determination. I couldn't believe how, in just 4 weeks, This man had gone from the love of my life to someone I felt disgusted towards when looking at him. I didn't want to entertain him, so I kept quiet when he tried to awkwardly ask how I was doing or if Cece was doing well. Eventually, Dave gathered his courage and told me how Martha had informed him of my decision to divorce him, which had shocked him completely. He told me that finally hearing the word divorce had made him realize what exactly he had done, and he didn't want to lose me and Cece. I stared at him blankly as he kept speaking all those empty words which I would have readily believed a few weeks ago, but now I knew much better. Dave then dropped a bombshell. He proposed that he wanted to come back to us and wanted me to forgive him. He said how things hadn't gone down the drain yet, so I could still forgive and forget about all of this so he could move back, and we would continue to live our normal lives. I stared at him in disbelief as he told me that he had realized that this was the life he wanted and couldn't imagine a life without us. I took a few moments to gather my thoughts. Although I did want my child to have her father in her life, I knew that Dave and I could never go back to who we were. I also knew that if Dave had really cared for us, then he would not have emptied our joint account and left me and Cece to starve. What he had done was unforgivable to me, and I could never forget it. As much as the idea of getting back together as a family appealed to me, I couldn't ignore the pain and anger that had built up from his abandonment. So I firmly told him that while I appreciated the offer, I just couldn't forget how he had selfishly decided to leave me and our baby to fend for ourselves. I told him that I was living at my parents' place, and they were much more of a parent figure to Cece than Dave ever was. I reminded him how he had accused me of baby-trapping him, so he couldn't just waltz back into our lives because there was no guarantee that he wouldn't pull this again in the future. I wanted to protect Cece so she could have a stable family to rely on. I reminded him how he was selfish enough to wipe our joint account clean while leaving me all alone to take care of our infant daughter, to which Dave tried to clarify how he knew my parents would take care of us and that he needed to clear his head. I scoffed at his audacity and told him that I would never be coming back to him. Dave kept pleading with me to reconsider, his eyes filled with desperation, but I knew that if I allowed him back into our lives, I would be taking a huge gamble, and I didn't want that anymore. My heart ached a bit at the thought of rejecting his offer, but I couldn't overlook the permanent emotional scars he had left behind. I walked out of the cafe, thinking this would be the last time I had to hear from him. Unfortunately, since my meeting with Dave, Martha has been trying to make me reconsider my decision. She keeps saying how I should think about Cece and that my daughter would want to live with both her parents. She keeps arguing that Dave made a mistake and that, as his wife, I should forgive him. She clearly thinks I'm being selfish and wants me to put my child's comfort above my heartbreak. However, I am adamant about not giving Dave another chance. Due to her words, I've been questioning my own judgment, torn between the potential benefits of accepting Dave's offer and the memories of his abandonment. So, am I in the wrong for rejecting Dave's offer and possibly keeping Cece from having a whole family? Should I forgive Dave and get back together with him? Update 1. In just a few days, I have received thousands of comments and messages from people. I am glad that a majority of you don't think I am in the wrong. I listened to everyone's advice and decided to first talk to my parents regarding this. They were shocked to hear that Dave had gotten back in touch with me, and my mother was furious that I went to meet him all on my own. My dad told me how Dave's constant changing of mind was really worrisome and this could be a mental health issue, just like a lot of people have been commenting, so I should not be meeting him all alone. I agreed and told my parents of my decision to not let Dave back into our lives. My parents heaved a sigh of relief and told me that this was the right decision and that I should continue to focus on my divorce. Following this, I plan on talking to my lawyer about the next course of action so we can speed up the divorce process. I know there will be people who will think that I should forgive Dave, but this is no longer about me. My daughter deserves to have a more loving parent, and clearly Dave doesn't love us, so he doesn't deserve to have a second chance. Also, there are a few people who seem to think that Dave might have left me for another woman and it couldn't have been just his mental health issue. Well, to be honest, I really don't care what his reason was. He abandoned us and left me to pick up the pieces, regardless of why he chose to do what he did. Update 2. The divorce papers have been served to Dave, who is apparently living with his mother currently. Since then, his relentless calls have become increasingly desperate over the past few weeks, and no matter how much I explain to him that I do not want him back, he keeps calling. As a non-confrontational person, I feel cornered and emotionally drained by his constant attempts to reach me. Martha has also been sending me messages about forgiveness and the sacrifices of being a good mother. My dad decided to take matters into his own hands and went to pay Dave a visit. He firmly told Dave that he was lucky that there were laws in our country. Otherwise, he would have buried him alive after what he did to me and his granddaughter. My dad is a buff military guy, so I can only imagine how scared Dave must have been after their talk. My dad warned him to not contact me unnecessarily, and that he could communicate through his lawyers only. Martha tried to make my dad see how forgiving Dave would be best for everyone, but my dad retorted that she should have raised a better son who should have never walked out on his family in the first place. Martha argued that Dave was going through something mentally, but my dad pointed out how he had blamed me and Cece for walking out, so she should be blaming her son for all this and not asking me to forgive him. Her texts also stopped after this. Meanwhile, despite all this, I am trying my best to not lose my focus on my work and perform well. I don't want to lose out on my job since I am saving up money to eventually move out on my own. My parents have been more than helpful, and I am grateful for them every day. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have the support of such loving parents. I have blocked Dave for now so he can't disturb me anymore. I plan to see him directly during our divorce proceedings. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I can finally give an update. Our divorce is proceeding as updated earlier, and Dave has been fighting tooth and nail to make this as hard for me as possible. He clearly just wants to drag it out. Since we both own nothing, there is no property to split, and I do not want anything from him in alimony, but his lawyer has been demanding equal co-parent rights when it comes to Cece, which is absolutely ridiculous because I do not want my daughter to be anywhere with an unstable person like him. To protect my daughter, my lawyer then had to tell the court about Dave's mental health issues over the years, which I would have otherwise not liked to discuss, and how he abandoned us out of nowhere by taking all the money from our joint account and blaming me for baby-trapping him despite me earning more than him. I am hoping that the court realizes how unreliable he is and doesn't grant him custody because there is no guarantee of what he can do to Cece with how his mind works if she is left with him all alone. Dave's mother, Martha, comes to all our court proceedings and looks at me with disdain. But I neither acknowledge her nor do I care any longer about how she feels. I would have accepted her having a relationship with my daughter had she not decided to blame me and coerce me into forgiving her pathetic son. I will do what is best for my child. She has tried to talk to me several times after our court sessions, but my dad always quickly whisks me away from her. I know that it's going to take a while before I'm freed of Dave legally, but in the meantime, I have decided to take some time off so I can take my parents and Cece to Napa Valley. My parents had always wanted to go there, and I feel like we all need a break from this ongoing drama. I want to create beautiful, joyous memories with my family despite what we are all going through. I know as long as we have each other, we can face whatever the future holds with strength and resilience. Update 4. Since my last update 5 months ago, I have some happy and exciting news to share. First of all, I was recently promoted at work, and it feels like a huge accomplishment since I now have better pay and can finally earn a comfortable income that would allow me to move out and live comfortably on my own with Cece. Although my parents don't want me to go since they have become extremely close with Cece, I feel like this is a necessary step to find my own independence, and they understand. The promotion did not just bring financial security but also the satisfaction of knowing that my hard work and dedication had finally paid off in the end. Secondly, I am finally divorced. Thanks to my lawyer who fought for me every day for the last few months, I am finally free from Dave and his mother. They did try to make my life hell, but in the end, the judge saw that Dave wasn't a fit parent. They have ordered Dave to pay child support every month and go for mandatory therapy sessions where he will be monitored. If the results are positive, then he may reapply for the decision of his parenting rights if he wants to. I doubt that he will go through all this again, but in case if he ever decides to do that, then I am ready to fight him again. My family and friends have stood by my side throughout all this, providing me support in any way that they can. Now that I am earning more than enough, I plan on going to therapy. I understand that I might have abandonment issues, so these therapy classes will help me better process my emotions and work through any lingering issues so I can be a better parent to Cece. I have been researching therapists with expertise, and have found a compassionate and experienced therapist who specializes in helping families navigate such complex emotions. Despite the challenges and emotional turmoil we have faced, my family and I are going to be okay. This chapter is far from over, but I'm going to be writing my own story from now on, and I am determined to ensure it's one filled with love, trust, and growth with my daughter. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. My sister is my mom's golden child, and my mom pushes me out when I take my stand. My perfect sister then runs away with mom's money, leaving her devastated. I, 23F, lived with my mom, 52F, and elder sister, 26F, in our family home. It had been this way ever since my dad passed away 5 years ago. My sister, let's call her Emma, was always mom's favorite. This wasn't just my imagination. It was pretty obvious to anyone who spent more than 5 minutes with our family growing up. Emma always got the newest clothes, the latest gadgets, and the most attention. Mom would attend all of Emma's school events, but when it came to mine, there was always some excuse. I'm too tired, or I have to work late, she'd say. Stung, but I got used to it. Things didn't change much as we got older. Emma went to a prestigious university to study law, while I chose to attend a local community college for my associate's degree in graphic design. Mom couldn't stop bragging about Emma to anyone who would listen. My Emma is going to be a big-shot lawyer one day, she'd say proudly. Meanwhile, my chosen career path was met with indifference at best and disappointment at worst. But the real issue wasn't just the favoritism. It was the unfair distribution of responsibilities at home. Since Emma was focusing on her studies, I was expected to take care of all the household chores, and when I say all, I mean all of them. Every morning, I'd wake up at 6 a.m. to start my day. First, I'd make breakfast for everyone. Mom liked her egg sunny side up with toast, no crust. Emma preferred a veggie omelet with a side of fruit. I'd usually just grab a granola bar for myself as I rushed around. After breakfast, I'd clean up the kitchen, do the dishes, and start a load of laundry before heading out for my part-time job at a local coffee shop. I worked there to save up money for my own place and to contribute to the household expenses, even though Mom never asked Emma to chip in. When I'd get home in the afternoon, there was always more to do. Vacuuming, dusting, mopping, you name it, I did it. I'd also be in charge of grocery shopping and meal planning. Mom had a lot of dietary restrictions and Emma was picky, so this was always a challenge. Dinner was another production. I'd cook elaborate meals while Emma lounged on the couch scrolling through her phone. Mom would chat with her about her day, her studies, her future plans. I'd be lucky to get a word in sideways. After dinner, guess who was stuck with the cleanup? Yep, me again. And if I ever dared to complain or ask for help, Mom would give me this disappointed look and say something like, "Your sister needs to focus on her studies. She's going to have a bright future and take care of us all one day. The least you can do is help out around the house." It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. I felt like a maid in my own home, constantly running around while Emma got to relax and enjoy herself. The worst part was Mom didn't seem to notice or care about my efforts. It was always Emma this and Emma that. One particular day, things came to a head. It was a Saturday, and I had planned to meet up with some friends from college. We were going to work on a group project for our design class. I had been looking forward to it all week, not just for the project, but for the chance to get out of the house and have some social interaction that didn't involve serving coffee or doing chores. I woke up early as usual to get my chores done before leaving. As I was making breakfast, Mom came into the kitchen. "Oh, good, you're up," she said. "I need you to deep clean the living room today. The carpet needs shampooing, and the curtains need to be taken down and washed." I felt my heart sink. "But Mom," I protested, "I have plans today. I told you about my group project. Remember?" Mom frowned. "Can't you reschedule? This is important. We're having guests over next week, and I want the house to look perfect." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I can't reschedule. We've been planning this for weeks. Maybe Emma could help with the cleaning?" As if on cue, Emma walked into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, despite it being nearly 10 a.m. She yawned, grabbing a muffin from the plate I had just set out. Mom's face softened as she turned to Emma. Good morning, sweetie. Did you sleep well? Don't forget you have that online study group later. Emma nodded, her mouth full of muffin. Mom turned back to me, her expression hardening again. Your sister has important studying to do. She can't be expected to clean. You know how crucial her education is. I felt something snap inside me. All the frustration, anger, and hurt that had been building up over the years came pouring out. And what about my education? I asked, my voice rising. What about my plans? My life? Don't they matter at all? Mom looked taken aback. Of course they matter, but I cut her off. But not as much as Emma's, right? Never as much as Emma's. Emma, who had been watching this exchange with wide eyes, finally spoke up. Hey, don't drag me into this. It's not my fault Mom asks you to do the chores. That just made me angrier. No, it's not your fault, but you've never once offered to help. You just sit back and let it happen. Mom tried to intervene. Now let's all calm down. There's no need to, but I was on a roll now. Years of pent-up emotions were spilling out, and I couldn't stop them. No, Mom. I'm done calming down. I'm done being the maid in this house. I'm done being treated like I'm less important than Emma. I'm done with the favoritism, the unfair expectations. All of it. I turned to Emma. You want to know why Mom never asks you to do chores? It's because she thinks you're going to be this big success and take care of her in the future. That's a lot of pressure, isn't it? But hey, at least you get to relax now while I do all the work. Emma's face flushed. That's not fair. I work hard at my studies and I shot back. I'm working part-time, studying and doing all the housework. When do I get to focus on my future? Mom tried to step in again. Sweetheart, you know we appreciate everything you do. It's just that Emma's career path is more, well, it's going to be more financially rewarding in the long run. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. So that's it, then? My worth to this family is measured by how much money I might make in the future. Mom backtracked quickly. That's not what I meant. It's just that law is a more stable career than what you're studying. Graphic design, I said. Mom, I'm studying graphic design. Have you even bothered to learn anything about it? About what I want to do with my life? The look on Mom's face told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't bothered. She'd written off my career choice without ever really understanding it. I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wasn't gonna cry, not now. You know what? I'm done. I'm not cleaning the living room today. I'm gonna meet my friends and work on my project. And when I get back, we're gonna have a serious conversation about how things run in this house, or I'm moving out. With that, I grabbed my bag and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Mom and Emma staring after me in shock as I slammed the front door behind me. I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, hurt, but also a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself. The rest of the day was a blur. I met up with my friends and threw myself into our project, trying to push the morning's confrontation out of my mind. But as the day wore on, doubts started to creep in. Had I overreacted? Was I being selfish? Maybe I should have just rescheduled my plans and done the cleaning as Mom asked. Date 1. I returned home late that evening, mentally exhausted from the day's events but determined to have that serious conversation I'd promised. However, as soon as I walked through the door, I could feel the tension in the air. Mom and Emma were both in the living room, but they barely glanced at me when I entered. Hey, I said hesitantly. Can we talk? Silence. They both stared straight ahead at the TV, though I could tell neither was really watching it. I took a deep breath and decided to push forward anyway. Look, I know this morning was intense, but I really think we need to address this. All I'm asking for is a little help from Emma with the household chores. It would make me feel like we're being treated equally. Finally, Mom turned to face me, her expression cold. I think you've said quite enough already. Emma chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. Yeah, we heard you loud and clear this morning. You're jealous of me and my potential future. How selfish can you be? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Selfish? How is asking for help selfish? Mom shook her head. You're disrupting the peace in this house. Emma needs to focus on her studies. You're just jealous because you know your little hobby won't amount to much. Hobby? I repeated incredulously. Graphic design is a real career, Mom. If you'd ever bothered to learn about it. Mom cut me off. I won't have you disrespecting us like this in our own home. I stood there stunned. I'd hoped that maybe, just maybe, they'd have reflected on what I said and realized how unfair things had been. But instead, they doubled down. Our own home, I repeated softly. Right? Well, I guess it's not my home anymore. Without another word, I turned and went to my room. I threw some clothes and essentials into a backpack, grabbed my laptop, and walked back out. Mom and Emma were still in the living room, steadfastly ignoring me. I'll be at Sarah's, I said, referring to a close friend from college. I'll come back for the rest of my stuff later. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. I knew this wasn't a permanent solution, but for now, I needed space to think and plan my next move. At least at Sarah's, I wouldn't be treated like a maid or made to feel worthless. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I deserve better than this. This time I started believing that. Update 2. It's been about 3 months since I moved out of my family home, and I have to say it's been a revelation. I've been staying with my friend Sarah, splitting rent and chores equally. The change in my daily life has been dramatic. Without the constant burden of all the household responsibilities, I've been able to focus on my studies and my budding career in graphic design like never before. I've completed several freelance projects, built up my portfolio, and even landed an internship at a local marketing firm. It's amazing what you can achieve when you're not exhausted from being everyone else's maid. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? Last week, I ran into our neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, at the grocery store. She asked how I was doing and then, with a concerned look, asked about Mom. Apparently, she'd noticed Mom struggling with yard work and looking overwhelmed lately. I offered to help. Mrs. Johnson said, "But your mother insisted she was fine." I thought maybe Emma was helping her out. I felt a pang of guilt, quickly followed by frustration. Of course, Emma wasn't helping. Why would she start now? But that wasn't even the biggest shock. Mrs. Johnson, in her well-meaning but gossipy way, dropped another bombshell. "And how is Emma doing with her studies? I hope that situation with Professor Andrews hasn't affected her too much." I must have looked confused because Mrs. Johnson's eyes widened. "Oh dear, I thought you knew. Emma's been seen around town with Professor Andrews quite a lot. There's been talk." I thanked Mrs. Johnson and left the store in a daze. Emma, my perfect sister, who was supposed to be focusing on her bright future in law, was fooling around with a professor, and apparently, it was serious enough that the neighbors were noticing and gossiping about it. Part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. The golden child wasn't so golden after all. But mostly, I felt sad. Sad for Mom, who was now struggling alone with all the chores I used to do. Sad for Emma, who was risking her future for a fling with a professor. And sad for our family, which seemed to be falling apart without me there to hold it together. I'm not sure what to do with this information. Part of me wants to reach out to try and mend fences, but another part remembers the hurt, the years of being treated as less than, and wonders if it's worth it. For now, I'm focusing on my own growth and healing. I'm learning to value myself and my chosen career path. I'm building a life where I'm respected and my contributions are appreciated. Maybe someday Mom and Emma will realize what they've lost. Maybe they won't. But I know that I'm better off now, standing on my own 2 feet, than I ever was trying to earn their approval. Update 3. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? 6 months later, just when I thought I had everything figured out, the universe decided to throw another curveball my way. It was a quiet Sunday evening. I was working on a freelance project when my phone rang. It was Mom. I hesitated before answering. We hadn't spoken much since I left. When I picked up, I was met with the sound of my mother sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked, my heart racing. Through her tears, she managed to choke out, "Emma. She's gone. She ran away with some boy from her university, and she took most of my savings." I felt like I'd been drenched with cold water. Despite everything, Emma was still my sister, and hearing that she'd done something so reckless and hurtful was shocking. "I'm coming over," I said, already grabbing my keys. When I arrived at my childhood home, the sight nearly broke my heart. The house was a mess. Nothing like the immaculate home Mom had always maintained. And Mom, she looked like she'd aged years in just a few months. As soon as she saw me, she broke down again. I held her as she cried, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't quite sort out. When she calmed down, Mom looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I've been such a fool," she said softly. "These past few months, they've opened my eyes. I was so wrong about so many things, about Emma, about you. You were always the responsible one, the one I could count on, and instead of appreciating you, I took you for granted. I'm so sorry, sweetheart." I felt tears welling up in my own eyes. This was the acknowledgement I'd always wanted but never thought I'd get. "I know I don't deserve it," Mom continued, "but I need you. Would you consider coming back home? I promise things will be different." Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect myself from potentially being hurt again. But looking at Mom, vulnerable and genuinely remorseful, I knew I couldn't turn my back on her. "Okay, Mom," I said softly, "I'll come back. But things really do need to be different this time." She nodded eagerly, relief washing over her face. "They will be, I promise." So here I am, back in my childhood home. It's strange and a little uncomfortable, but also oddly comforting. Mom and I are learning to communicate better, to appreciate each other. She's taken a genuine interest in my graphic design work, even asking me to teach her some basics. We're working together to clean up the house and sort out the financial mess Emma left behind. It's not easy, but we're managing. As for Emma, we haven't heard from her. I hope she's safe, but I can't help feeling angry at her for what she's done. I'm continuing my freelance work and my internship, and Mom is respecting my time and space to do so. It's a delicate balance, but we're figuring it out day by day. I don't know what the future holds. Part of me is still wary, still protecting my heart, but another part is hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this is the fresh start our family needed. It's not the happily ever after I might have once imagined, but it's real, and for now, that's enough. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Nearly lost a testicle while my girlfriend ignored my calls for help, laughed at my pain, and blocked me to keep clubbing. Now she's begging for another chance. I, 22M, and my girlfriend, 22F, have been together for 5 years. We've been together since high school, and until recently, I've always considered her to be my future wife. I've even bought a ring and was planning on proposing over the coming months. Well, last weekend it was my girlfriend's best friend's birthday. She and her friends booked a private lounge at a club. Obviously, I didn't go since 1, I wasn't invited, and 2, I hate clubbing or anything associated with that. I was actually looking forward to spending an evening alone and just binging Netflix or something. Well, my GF left around 9 p.m., and I just crashed on the couch and watched some YouTube. Around 11 p.m., I started to feel this distinct stomach pain, the same pain you experience when someone hits you in the nuts. It wasn't bad at first, and I just thought my body was playing some tricks on me. But in the span of about 5 minutes, the pain just kept getting worse until I was basically stuck in the fetal position on the couch. Again, initially, I just thought the pain would go, but then I pulled down my pants, and it felt like my right testicle was starting to swell. The moment I tried to get up and grab my phone to inspect whatever the hell was happening to me, I just collapsed to the floor. That was probably the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Imagine being pelted in the nuts over and over again. I did manage to crawl to the table next to the couch to get my phone. I immediately tried calling my GF, but she declined my call. I then texted her that something was wrong and she could come home immediately. The club she went to is like a 5-minute walk from our apartment. I just put the phone down and started throwing up because of the pain. After throwing up for like a minute, it felt like the pain started to cool down a bit, and I grabbed my phone again, and that's when I saw her response. She just replied with a "What is it?" I tried calling her again, but as expected, she just declined again. I then texted her that I need to go to the hospital now. She then asked for what, and I just replied with "my balls hurt." I then just dialed for emergency services. I explained my situation to the emergency responder, and she asked if there was somebody that could drive me to the hospital, and I stupidly said yes. I thought my GF would be home soon, and she would drive me to the hospital. I felt embarrassed to call an ambulance because my balls hurt. After I told the emergency responder this, she then told me that she would call me again in 10 minutes to make sure I was being driven to the hospital. I then put down the phone and went back to vomiting on our carpet. Again, after the pain went away for a bit, I checked my phone and saw that my GF just responded with laughing emojis. I again tried to call her, but as expected, she just declined again. She texted me that this wasn't the time to play games, and she then told me that if I texted or called her again, she would block my number. I again tried calling her, but she declined again, and when I tried calling her a second time, I realized she actually blocked me. I went back to curling up on the floor, and now I started shivering. At this point, I didn't care about being embarrassed and just called emergency services again and asked for an ambulance. It felt like an eternity, but the ambulance eventually came and rushed me to the hospital. I don't remember much of surgery since I was sedated, but I remember waking up eventually, and my right testicle was being stitched together. The doctor informed me that I had a testicular torsion, and I was extremely lucky to reach the hospital in time. I could have easily been forced to surgically remove my testicle. I checked my phone and saw the missed calls and messages my GF left me. In summary, she came home from clubbing and smelled the vomit in our apartment. When she saw the vomit on our carpet, she got mad and tried searching the apartment to find me. When she realized I wasn't there, only then did it hit her that I was actually being serious. I just texted her in which hospital I was staying, in my room number, then went to sleep. I woke up the next morning and saw my GF sleeping on a couch next to my bed. After she woke up, she started bombarding me with apologies. She thought I was joking, that I was trying to ruin their night, etc. I didn't have the energy to argue, so I just kept quiet. I was beyond hurt by what she did, and I wanted to break up with her then and there. Why the hell would somebody ignore messages where their partner is begging them to come home? Not only that, she stayed in the club until 3 a.m. and didn't even consider going home to check on me. She did stay with me in the hospital for the remaining 2 days I was admitted there and did take good care of me, but I was still beyond pissed at her. Ever since coming home yesterday, I've been wanting to dump her, but at the same time, I feel like she genuinely thought I was joking and made a mistake. I feel conflicted and don't know how to proceed in this situation. What if I dumped her? Am I overreacting? How would you guys navigate this mess? Edit. Just to clarify, no, I never had an issue with her going out in the first place or have ever pulled pranks for her to come home from a night out. And by the way, thank you guys so much for the support. I'm beyond blown away by comments. Now for some comments. Poncho25004. This is a weird one. If someone texts me telling me they need to go to the hospital because their balls hurt, I'd think they were out of their mind. If they text me telling me they're in excruciating pain, vomiting on the floor, and feeling like their balls are being repeatedly ripped from their body, I'd be there in minutes. Local record 777. NTA. Not walking a total 10 minutes to check on your so after your texts is nuts, unless you've cried wolf before. Edit. I'm not insinuating it was a recurring event. I don't condone drunk driving. Walking to check on OP was what I said and meant. Satter Wind 8580. Even if she thought you were joking, you deserved a phone call. Your partner should be worried about you versa. Why are you ruining my night? Have you ever done this before? She could have called to confirm something was or was not wrong. When you said hospital, I would really consider if you want to continue this relationship. She prioritized partying over a phone call. Hospital and still blocked you and was planning on yelling about the vomiting. I wish you well in your healing. Low beams. Former paramedic here. Dude, when you're in that level of pain, don't call your GF, call emergency services. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Oh, and NTA, but your GF is. They have a strong disconnect in communication styles. If they get married before figuring it out, they're going to blame each other. What is her communication style in this scenario? I don't think there's enough info on how they communicate. My wife absolutely would laugh at me if I said my balls hurt, but would also drop everything if I told her I was serious. If OP has never had an emergency in this relationship, especially being so young, it's not unreasonable to assume their GF thought it was a joke. This can be an excellent moment for discussions. OP. She did stay by you and clearly feels awful about her initial reaction. You never need a reason to end a relationship, but if you have a desire to stay, use this as a chance to set up clearer communication. Jokes are well and good, but blocking is too far. Going forward, that also means when you are joking, you need clarity on what's too far so blocking isn't required. NTA. Sorry someone cast testicular torsion on you. Update. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for the amazing support. It's been quite overwhelming, to be honest. I have so many unread messages, so please guys, give me some time. I promise I'll respond to all of them. First of all, I would like to clear up some misconceptions brewing in the comments section of my last post. No, I have never pulled any malicious pranks on my girlfriend to get her to come home early from a night out or anything. Neither do I have an issue with her going out as long as she doesn't come home at like 6 a.m. And no, I've never blown up her phone like that while she was out with friends. We usually go out together since we share the same friend groups. Here are mine and her messages from WhatsApp, in order, since people thought I just texted her my balls hurt or something. Translate. Me. Decline my first 2 calls. Her name. Please come home, something is wrong. Her. Can't talk, RN, what is it? Me. Tried calling her again. I need to go to the hospital. Her. What? Me. Again tried calling her twice. My balls hurt, please come now, something is wrong. Her. Laughing emojis. Me. Tried calling her again twice after calling emergency services. Her. I swear don't bother me again or I'm blocking you, let me enjoy my night out. Me. Tried calling her again twice and got blocked. At this point, the pain was too bad to try anything with her anymore, and I just called an ambulance. Her. Next message after unblocking me at 2 a.m. My name, why the hell is there vomit in the living room, and where the hell are you? Why is the front door unlocked if you left somewhere? She then went into a full mental breakdown as she realized I was being serious about going to the hospital. Over 70 messages. Yes, it was stupid of me to expect her to drive me to the hospital since she was drinking. But again, in that type of pain, you don't think clearly. I think I needed her more for moral support, and I did it out of pure instinct. Not immediately calling an ambulance was also stupid of me. I was in a lot of pain, but stupidly at the time thought that whatever I was going through would eventually calm down, and driving to the hospital would be better than calling an ambulance. Also, in hindsight, me being embarrassed about calling an ambulance over my balls was definitely also really stupid. The amount of mental gymnastics some of you did in my comments to paint me as some sort of dweeb or emotionally needy person for bothering my GF was truly mind-blowing to me. I promise you, if my GF was in my position and I ignored her, none of you would be defending me. Now for the update. Thank for all those who wished me a speedy recovery. I'm doing much better now. Not being able to go to work for the next 3 weeks is definitely a bummer. I work for my dad's construction company, and my job requires lifting a lot of heavy weights. I'm also prohibited from having any sex for the next 2 to 3 weeks as well. I might have also developed some trauma due to the pain. I randomly get the same sensation again, and it's driving me nuts. See what I did there? As for me and my GF, it's complicated. As so many of you and my mom told me, 5 years is definitely a long time to be just throwing away without having a proper conversation with her, so I did just that. I told her how hurt I felt by everything. I mentioned the following points: her ignoring my messages and declining my calls. Yes, clubs are loud, but where I'm from, there are smoking areas where you can definitely have a conversation over the phone. Blocking me after I tried calling her. Her not checking on me once even though the club she went to is only a 5-minute walk from our apartment. Her being angry about the vomit instead of being concerned. After hearing that, she got defensive and told me that I could have conveyed my situation better and that she genuinely thought I was joking. She was drunk and wasn't thinking clearly. She also told me that it couldn't have been that painful and I was over-exaggerating. I then told her yes, I could have phrased my messages better, and I apologized for that, but I then described the pain I was in and told her that I barely had the strength to text her, let alone send her a detailed description of what was happening to me, and definitely couldn't think straight throughout everything. After hearing what I said, She started crying and apologizing for what she did. She told me if she knew how serious it was, we wouldn't have been having this conversation. She then also apologized for her being mad over the vomit. According to her, she was drunk and tired and was just expressing frustration. I then asked her why she thought I was joking and if she was cheating on me because this was seriously out of character for her, hence why I immediately trusted her with this. She started crying harder, and she looked like I just slapped her in the face. She told me that she just thought I was being insecure about her being in the club with a bunch of guys. And no, she wasn't cheating on me and would never do something like that. We then hugged for a solid 10 minutes. After that, the next part was really hard for me, but I told her I need some space to gather my thoughts and told her she needs to stay with her parents for the time being. She immediately started having a mental breakdown and asked if I was breaking up with her. I told her I wasn't sure and needed time to see if I still trusted her after all of this. And what she did was beyond disrespectful. How could I trust someone with my life after they pulled something like this? I then told her that we are young, and this mess was mostly caused by our immaturity. This entire situation was an important life lesson for the both of us, regardless if we stayed together. After begging a bit more, she then put her head down and started packing a few essentials before leaving. She told she would be willing to do anything to make up for this and that I could take as much time as I needed. She then gave me a big kiss and left. That was 2 days ago, and this is where we currently stand. I still don't have that trust in her, but her owning up to her mistake shows that she knows she screwed up and is remorseful. This is definitely something out of the ordinary for her, but there will have to be major boundaries and new rules set. I can think of the following. If she blocks me again for anything, equals blocking herself from ever seeing me again. Ignoring my messages will not be tolerated anymore. If she goes out alone again, she has to pick up if I call regardless of the situation. As many of you suggested, having an emergency code like hospital or something would probably have to be implemented. I'm not going to abuse any of these boundaries, but I just want peace of mind knowing that my partner has my best interest at heart, even when she is physically not around me. But I just want to thank you guys for everything, and this whole experience was definitely an eye-opener for me. Should I get back together with her? If yes, would my demands be reasonable? And could I add something more? What if I dumped her over this whole saga? Now for some comments. Gilo NH. Timing doesn't mean you need to stay with someone. That just delays the ending of it. If you think you can't get past not trusting her, you would not be an a-hole if you chose to end it. You would also not be one if you decided to give it a go. You need to go with your gut. I personally would have a hard time getting past someone blocking me when we are in a relationship. That level of petty would be too much for me. To me, that does not imply a partnership, and I need a partnership with my significant other. This October will be my 30th anniversary of being married. If he blocked me or did not pick up when I made multiple calls, that would be a trust broken, and I'm not sure I would be able to get past that. That bank row when I woke up my partner in the middle of the night. For him it was 9 a.m., but he got off work at 5 a.m. In pain so bad. All I could communicate was, something is wrong. He dropped everything to help me. He drove me to the hospital, called my parents for me, explained what had been going on to the doctors, advocated for me to get pain meds, and stayed with me the entire time. That's what a caring partner should do. If a partner doesn't help, okay, maybe they can't. If my partner even called me twice in a row, I'd drop everything to answer or call back. If for some reason I can't, I'll text him. Your partner is a million red flags disguised as human. I think Whitecore comment 381. But also, I would never be able to recover from this if this happened to me. You were having a medical emergency, and she's still trying to blame you for not communicating clearly. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Discovered that my long-distance girlfriend of a year was married the whole time. So I met with her husband, exposed the affair, and got revenge. About a year ago, I, 29 male, met a woman, 31 female, at a conference in Baltimore. I was only there for work, and I wasn't expecting our night together to evolve into anything else. But we hit it off, and after hooking up for the first time during the conference, we exchanged numbers and we kept in touch. We lived about an hour away from each other, so it wasn't far enough to completely rule out a long-distance relationship. We didn't get to see each other often, but we would text and chat when we were both available. About once or twice a month, she would visit me in the city, and we would go out together. I loved seeing her. We had a wonderful connection, and I really felt like our relationship could go somewhere. However, in hindsight, I realized that I was putting more into the relationship than she was. I didn't think anything about our relationship until I was talking to a friend about us. I explained to her how my girlfriend would visit me, but I almost never visited her. Just to clarify, it wasn't for lack of trying. I had been vocal about wanting to travel to her apartment and meet her friends. My friend was a little weirded out by that. She said that it was odd that my girlfriend didn't want me to visit her, but at the same time, my friend is the type of person who listens to a lot of true crime and watches too much TV. We both kind of laughed it off like she was assuming there was something more going on. But our conversation did get me thinking. I thought I knew my girlfriend from the conversations we had, but it was all surface level. I knew what TV shows and books she liked, but I didn't know anything about her family. The next time I talked to her on the phone, I asked her more about herself. I wasn't asking in a way to accuse her of anything, but I genuinely wanted to learn more about her because I saw a future with her. She just told me that there wasn't much to talk about. She gave me a short story about being an only child and her parents having passed away. It made sense that if she didn't have any family around, she wouldn't bring it up, so I moved on. Months passed in our relationship, and she still didn't want me to come visit her. It was difficult for me because I really wanted to meet her friends. By that point, she had met a few of mine and they really liked her. I wanted to see the city she lived in because I was considering suggesting that we move in together. No matter how many times I asked, she always shut down the idea of me visiting. I didn't think much about it at the time, but all of our conversations were very sexual. Whenever we would be together, we would go to dinner or a bar, then we would go right back to my apartment and sleep together. I kind of just thought that it was because we were apart for so long, but after a while, the lack of depth with our conversations was getting to me. I was talking to another friend about her, just venting some of my frustrations, and he mentioned that I might be a side piece. I was very shocked to hear that and honestly kind of hurt at the time. I felt like I had something special with her, and hearing that it might have been less than I thought was awful. He pointed out all of the facts and told me that if she's being very secretive about her life, it probably means that there's something she doesn't want me to know. That thing might have been that she had a partner, possibly family. I couldn't believe that. There was no chance in hell that was the case. I actually got kind of mad at my friend for even suggesting that, so I went home and I stewed on it for a while. When my anger subsided, I started to see some merit to the point he was making. I went online to read other stories about people who were unknowingly sleeping with committed people, and a lot of my circumstances aligned. I had asked my girlfriend early on in the relationship for her social media so we could add each other, but she just told me she didn't have any. She then proceeded to tell me all about how vile she thought it was, so I believed her. However, after looking online for her, I found her profiles. She had lied about having social media so she wouldn't have to add me to them. When I clicked on the Facebook link from Google, I realized that I was blocked. She was definitely trying to hide something from me. I made a fake account, and I searched for her again just so I could see for myself what she was hiding. Just from the public view of her profile, I could see that she was married and seemed to be happy from the looks of it. There was a young child and a few of the photos. I didn't know if it was hers or what. I found her husband's name through her profile, and I started looking at his. From what I could gather, they have been together since high school. I had my suspicion something was going on, and I finally had an answer. Honestly, I kind of regretted looking into it. Before that, I had a great relationship with someone that I didn't feel guilty about. After looking at it, I couldn't help but feel like I was a bad person. I knew that I didn't know about her family, but I was still sleeping with her. Right away, I knew that I was going to end everything with her, but it didn't feel right to let her get away with cheating. I needed to think of some way to tell her husband and also teach her a lesson about what she did. Through looking at his social media, I could tell that he was a realtor. I reached out to him and I set up a meeting to have a conversation with him. I said I was interested in buying a house, but of course that was a lie. I made sure our meeting was going to be during a time when my girlfriend wasn't in the house because I didn't want her to find out about it. When the time for the meeting came, we spent a few minutes chatting with each other while I tried to decide if I actually had the nerve to tell them everything. I didn't know if that would be the end for them, I hoped that it would be because she had betrayed their marriage by being with me. After a few minutes, I confessed that I wasn't there to buy a house. I told him about how I met his wife and about the affair that ensued. After making sure he knew that I knew nothing about him and his family, he was as shocked as I was about the news. He told me something else that shocked me too. Apparently, she had been working weekends every week. She told him that it was only temporary while she was onboarding and training some new managers for work. After I told him about our relationship, he insinuated she was visiting me every weekend, but that wasn't the case. I honestly had to wonder if there was another person she was having an affair with. I only saw her once or twice a month. I sent him a bunch of screenshots and videos from our chats. I felt horrible when he was reading them in front of me. He told me that he was going to figure out what to do with them, and he thanked me for being honest with him. I spent the rest of the day feeling sick to my stomach. After the conversation, I genuinely believed that she had another person that she was sleeping with. 2 days later, she called me and was immediately irate. Apparently, I had no business digging around in her life after she had made it clear she didn't want me to. I ruined her marriage, and I was the worst thing that ever happened to her. I was shocked that she was blaming me for what happened. It was her choice to lie to her husband and have an affair. If I would have known that she was married, I would have never pursued her. Honestly, the fact that she wasn't even wearing her ring during the conference set in. After I got off the phone with her, I haven't heard from her since. Her husband, on the other hand, did end up divorcing her, and he told me that she's living with her mom until she finds a new place. I couldn't help but laugh hearing that because it made me think about how she told me her parents were dead. I'm honestly just really glad I'm past this part of my life. I'm hoping I can meet someone who is truly single and be happy. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I discovered my wife's cheating during quarantine and was devastated. I divorced her, even when she didn't want it, and moved on with my life. I never imagined I'd be here sharing my story on Reddit, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. I'm a 35-year-old guy, married to Lizzie, 33, for 7 years. We met during our sophomore year in college, both of us computer science majors with big dreams of making it in the tech world. I still remember the day we met. It was in the campus library, both of us cramming for a particularly brutal algorithms exam. Lizzie asked to borrow my notes, and we ended up studying together. One study session turned into many, and before long we were inseparable. We bonded over our shared love of coding, sci-fi movies, and terrible puns. After graduation, we both landed jobs at tech startups in the city and moved in together. Our relationship wasn't perfect. Who is? But we always managed to work through our issues. When Lizzie's mom was diagnosed with cancer 3 years into our relationship, I was there for her every step of the way. I held her hand during hospital visits, made sure she ate when she forgot to, and listened when she needed to vent. When her mom passed away a year later, it was a tough time for both of us, but it brought us closer together. We got married in a small ceremony in Lizzie's hometown, surrounded by friends and family. The first few years of marriage were great. We both advanced in our careers, bought a house in a nice suburban neighborhood, and started talking about having kids. We had our ups and downs, but I always thought we were solid. Then the pandemic hit and everything changed. At first, quarantine wasn't so bad. We both worked from home, spent more time together, and even picked up new hobbies. I started learning to play guitar, fulfilling a lifelong dream of mine. Lizzie got into baking, filling our house with the smell of fresh bread and cookies. Our neighbor, Ross, 38, would sometimes drop by to chat over the fence or share some of his homegrown vegetables. He was a friendly guy, always ready with a joke or a helping hand. I never thought much of it at the time. As the weeks turned into months, I noticed Lizzie became more distant. She'd spend hours on her phone, always turning the screen away when I came near. When I asked about it, she'd say she was just browsing social media or playing games. I believed her because, well, what else was there to do during lockdown? I tried to keep our relationship strong. I planned date nights at home, cooking her favorite meals and setting up our living room like a fancy restaurant. I even attempted to bake her a birthday cake. It was a disaster, but she laughed and we ate it anyway. Despite my efforts, Lizzie seemed to withdraw more and more. One day, about 4 months into quarantine, I woke up early and noticed Lizzie wasn't in bed. I figured she might be in the kitchen, so I went downstairs. The house was empty. I looked out the window and saw her coming out of Ross's house, still in her pajamas. When she came back, I asked her about it. She said she'd just gone to borrow some sugar for her baking. It seemed odd, but I didn't want to be paranoid, so I let it go. But things kept nagging at me. Lizzie was spending more time on her phone, taking calls in another room, and seemed irritated whenever I tried to spend time with her. I started noticing other things too, like how she'd perk up whenever Ross was outside, or how she'd make excuses to go check the mail multiple times a day. I didn't want to believe it, but the signs were all there. One night, I couldn't sleep and decided to check our phone bill. That's when I saw hundreds of texts and calls between Lizzie and Ross, often late at night or early in the morning. My heart sank. The next day, I confronted Lizzie. She denied everything at first, but when I showed her the phone records, she broke down. She admitted to having an affair with Ross for the past 3 months. She said she felt lonely and trapped during quarantine, and Ross had been there to listen. She swore it was just emotional at first, but eventually became physical. I was devastated. The woman I loved, the person I thought I'd spend my life with, had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and with our neighbor of all people, someone I'd considered a friend. I thought back to all the times we'd had Ross and his wife over for barbecues, how we'd helped them move in when they first arrived in the neighborhood. It made me feel sick. I told Lizzie I needed time to think and went to stay with my brother. Over the next few weeks, I did a lot of soul searching. I thought about our marriage, the good times we'd had, and whether I could ever trust her again. I remembered how we'd supported each other through tough times, like when I lost my job during the recession a few years back, and Lizzie had been my rock, or when we went through a miscarriage 2 years ago, a painful experience that had brought us closer together. But then I'd think about her sneaking around with Ross, lying to my face day after day. I'd imagine them laughing at me behind my back, and it would make my blood boil. In the end, I realized I couldn't get past it. The trust was broken, and I couldn't see a way to rebuild it. When I returned home, I told Lizzie I wanted a divorce. She begged me to reconsider, saying it was a mistake, and she'd do anything to make it right. She brought up all our history together, the plans we'd made for the future, but for me, the trust was broken. I couldn't imagine living next door to the man she'd cheated with, constantly wondering if it was still going on. I moved out and filed for divorce. Lizzie initially refused to sign the papers, insisting we could work it out. She suggested couples therapy, a trial separation, anything to avoid ending our marriage. But when I provided evidence of her infidelity, including the phone records and text messages I'd gathered, she finally agreed. Now, months later, the divorce is almost finalized. I'm living in a small apartment trying to rebuild my life. Some of our mutual friends have taken sides, with a few suggesting I should have tried harder to save the marriage. They remind me of how Lizzie stood by me during tough times, like when my dad had a heart attack last year and I was a mess. But I don't think I'm the one to blame here. I didn't break our vows or betray our trust. I'm just trying to move on with my life. It's not easy. There are days when I miss the life we had, the future we'd planned. We talked about having kids, buying a vacation home, growing old together. Now all of that is gone. Sometimes I lie awake at night wondering if I'm making a mistake. But then I remember the betrayal, the lies, and I know I'm doing the right thing for me. So, Reddit, AITA for divorcing my wife after discovering her affair during quarantine? Update 1. It's been a few months since my original post and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It really helped me during a difficult time. The divorce is now final. It wasn't easy, but I'm glad it's over. Lizzie tried to contest it at first, claiming that the affair was a one-time mistake brought on by the stress of quarantine. But when I presented the evidence, months of text messages, late-night calls, and even security camera footage of her entering and leaving Ross's house, she finally gave up. One thing I didn't mention in my original post was how this affected our wider circle of friends and family. When the news of Lizzie's affair got out, it was like a bomb went off in our social circle. Some friends took her side, saying that quarantine was hard on everyone and I should be more understanding. Others supported me, saying that nothing excuses cheating. My best friend from college, Tom, was particularly affected. He and his wife had been close with Lizzie and me, often double dating and vacationing together. When he found out about the affair, he was almost as hurt as I was. He felt betrayed too, saying he couldn't believe Lizzie would do this to all of us. It's been tough on his marriage too, as his wife was friends with Lizzie and is having a hard time cutting her off completely. My parents were devastated. They had always loved Lizzie and treated her like a daughter. When I told them what happened, my mom cried for hours. My dad, who's usually a pretty stoic guy, looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. They've been incredibly supportive though. Mom calls me every day to check in, and Dad's been helping me look for a new place to live. Lizzie's family was a different story. Her parents were furious, not at her, but at me. They accused me of abandoning their daughter when she made one little mistake. Her sister even called me, yelling that I was ruining Lizzie's life. I had to block their numbers for my own peace of mind. It's been particularly hard because I was close to Lizzie's family. Her dad had become like a second father to me, especially after we lost my father-in-law to cancer a few years ago. Losing that relationship has been another painful consequence of Lizzie's actions. As for Ross, he moved out of the neighborhood about a month after I filed for divorce. I heard through the grapevine that his wife found out about the affair too and kicked him out. Part of me feels sorry for her. She's as much a victim in this as I am. I ran into her at the grocery store last week. It was awkward at first, but we ended up talking for a while. She's struggling too, trying to explain to their kids why Daddy doesn't live at home anymore. It made me grateful, in a weird way, that Lizzie and I didn't have children. Work has been a challenge. Lizzie and I work for different companies now, but we used to be at the same firm. When word got around about why we were divorcing, it made things awkward. Some coworkers avoided me like I had the plague, while others wanted all the gossip. I ended up switching departments to get away from it all. It's been tough starting over in a new team, especially with everything else going on, but it's better than the constant reminders of my failed marriage. On a personal level, I'm doing okay. Some days are better than others. I've started seeing a therapist to work through my trust issues. It's hard to imagine being in another relationship right now. The thought of opening up to someone, being vulnerable again, is terrifying, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I've also connected with some old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. It's been great to have their support. We've been doing weekly game nights online, which has been a nice distraction. Last week, we played a virtual escape room game, and for a few hours, I forgot about all the drama in my life. As for Lizzie, I've gone no contact, except for necessary communication about the divorce. Last I heard, she was still living in our old house. Sometimes I drive by and see her car in the driveway, and it feels surreal, like I'm looking at someone else's life. There are moments when I miss her, miss our life together, but then I remember the betrayal, and the pain comes rushing back. I'm still angry and hurt, but I'm also starting to feel hopeful about the future. For the first time in months, I'm excited about what comes next. I'm planning a solo trip once it's safe to travel again, something I've always wanted to do but never got around to. I'm thinking about hiking the Appalachian Trail or maybe backpacking through Europe. It's scary to think about doing these things alone, but also exhilarating. To those who asked if I regret my decision, no, I don't. It hurts, and it's not the future I imagined, but I know it was the right choice for me. I deserve someone who respects me and our relationship enough to be faithful. Thank you again for all your support, Reddit. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's been almost a year since my first post, and I wanted to give you all a final update. So much has changed, and I'm in a much better place now. First, the practical stuff. I've moved to a new city for a job opportunity. It's been great to have a fresh start somewhere without all the painful memories. My new coworkers don't know about my past, and it's refreshing to just be me instead of the guy whose wife cheated. The job itself is challenging but rewarding. I'm working on a project developing AI for medical diagnostics, something I've always been passionate about. It feels good to be making a difference, even in a small way. The house Lizzie and I owned together finally sold. Splitting the proceeds was the last tie I had to her, and now that it's done, I feel like I can truly move on. I used my share to put a down payment on a small condo. It's the first place I've owned on my own, and even though it's not much, it feels like home. I've been slowly furnishing it, picking out each piece carefully. It's been therapeutic in a way, creating a space that's entirely my own. I've been continuing with therapy, and it's helped a lot. I've worked through a lot of my anger and trust issues. Don't get me wrong, I still have moments where it all comes rushing back, but they're less frequent now. My therapist suggested I start journaling, which I was skeptical about at first, but it's actually been really helpful. Writing down my thoughts and feelings has helped me process everything that's happened. One unexpected outcome of this whole ordeal is that I've become closer to my brother. He was my rock during the worst of it, letting me crash at his place and listening to me rant for hours. Now we talk almost every day and are planning a brother's road trip for next summer. We're thinking of driving down the Pacific Coast Highway, something we've talked about doing since we were kids. I've also rekindled my relationship with my college roommate, Alex. We had drifted apart over the years, mainly because Lizzie never really got along with him. Now I realize that might have been a red flag I missed. Alex and I have been catching up regularly, and it's been great to have that friendship back in my life. As for Lizzie, I haven't spoken to her in months. The last time was when we finalized the house sale. She tried to apologize again, said she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. I told her I forgave her, not for her sake but for mine. Holding on to that anger wasn't doing me any good, but I also made it clear that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. We're done, and that's not changing. I heard through mutual friends that she and Ross tried to make a go of it after their respective divorces, but it didn't last. Apparently, the trust issues were too much to overcome. Can't say I'm surprised. Last I heard, Lizzie had moved back to her hometown to be closer to her family. Part of me hopes she's doing okay, but mostly I'm just glad to have that chapter of my life closed. On a more positive note, I've started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I've met some interesting people. I'm taking it slow, being upfront about my past and my boundaries. It's scary but also exciting to feel those butterflies again. There's one woman, Ellie, who I've been seeing for a few weeks now. She's kind, funny, and understands my need to take things slow. We'll see where it goes, but for the first time in a long time, I'm feeling optimistic about the possibility of a relationship. I've also been focusing on personal growth. I finally finished that online guitar course I started during quarantine, and I've even written a few of my own songs. They're not great, but it's a good outlet for my emotions. I've also taken up rock climbing at a local gym. It's challenging and a great way to clear my head. My advice to anyone going through something similar: it gets better. It might not feel like it now, but you will get through this. Surround yourself with people who support you. Don't be afraid to seek professional help, and most importantly, be kind to yourself. There were days when I could barely get out of bed, when the pain and betrayal felt overwhelming, but little by little it got easier. Looking back, I don't regret my decision to end my marriage. Was it painful? Absolutely. There are still moments when I miss the life we had, the future we'd planned, but it also taught me a lot about myself, about resilience, and about what I really want in a partner and in life. To everyone who supported me through this journey, thank you. Your kind words and advice helped more than you know. I'm closing this chapter of my life now, but I'll always be grateful for the support I found here. Life isn't perfect. There are still tough days, still moments when the pain catches me off guard. But overall, I'm hopeful. I'm learning to trust again, to open myself up to new experiences and relationships. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. Here's to new beginnings and better days ahead. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Mill hated me for years, and at her birthday I overheard her talking about me. So I confronted her and found out my own mother told her I baby-trapped my husband by getting pregnant. Hi everyone, I'm Bridget, 35F, have been married to my husband, Archie, 37M, for almost 10 years now. Our love story kicked off in a pretty unexpected place. A cozy coffee house. Archie, being the charming guy he is, mustered up the courage to ask me out, and the rest, as they say, is history. Now, as for what we do, well, Archie has always been a smooth talker, which I guess explains how he won me over, and me? I work as a graphic designer, putting colors and shapes together to make things pop. Our dating life was pretty sweet. Nothing too fancy. Just a lot of laughs, late-night talks, and occasional movie nights cuddled up on the couch. But here's the kicker. Our wedding wasn't exactly your fairy tale affair. Nope, it was more of a whirlwind, shotgun-style event. You see, not long after we started dating, surprise, surprise, I found out I was pregnant. Cue the panic mode. We were both pretty young and hadn't really thought about tying the knot just yet. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, right? So there we were, faced with impending parenthood and the decision of what to do next. We talked it over, weighed our options, and decided to take the plunge, quite literally, into marriage. And let me tell you, planning a wedding in record time is no joke. We scrambled to organize a small ceremony, rounding up family and friends to witness our whirlwind union. But you know what? Despite the rush and the chaos, it felt right. Surrounded by loved ones, we exchanged vows, promising to stick by each other through thick and thin. And you know what else? Nobody seemed to bat an eye at the whole shotgun wedding thing. Our families were over the moon, showering us with love and support every step of the way. My folks and Archie's folks hit it off right from the start, which was such a relief. You never know how families are going to blend, but ours seemed to click instantly. It was like we'd all known each other for years, swapping stories and sharing laughs like old friends. Buckle up because here comes the plot twist. After I gave birth to our daughter, things started to get a bit frosty with my mother-in-law, Aita 65F. At first, I chalked it up to those pesky postpartum hormones wreaking havoc on my emotions. But as time went on, her chilly demeanor didn't thaw out one bit. It was like I'd suddenly become invisible to her. Whenever we were together, she'd barely acknowledge my presence, let alone engage in any meaningful conversation. I tried to strike up a chat, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Talk about awkward. And it wasn't just the silent treatment that got to me. Oh no, she had a knack for making me feel like I was constantly walking on eggshells. Every move I made seemed to be met with disapproval or criticism. Take, for instance, the way she'd nitpick at my cooking. I'd spend hours slaving away in the kitchen, trying to whip up a tasty meal for the family, only to have her pick apart every dish with a laundry list of complaints. Too salty, too bland, too spicy, you name it, she'd find something to gripe about. And let's not even get started on her comments about my parenting skills. It seemed like she had an opinion on everything, from how I dressed the baby to how I handled bedtime routines. No matter what I did, it was never good enough in her eyes. But perhaps the most frustrating part was her constant comparisons between me and Archie's ex-girlfriends. Yep, you heard that right. It was like she had a highlight reel of all his past flames, and she wasn't shy about reminding me how they were so much better at this or that. I'd smile and nod, trying to brush off her comments, but inside, it felt like a punch to the gut every time. Here I was, doing my best to be a loving wife and mother, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was always falling short in her eyes. And don't even get me started on the passive-aggressive gifts she'd give me on special occasions. You know, the not-so-subtle hints disguised as presents, like the cookbook filled with recipes for dishes she knew I couldn't stand, or the parenting book that felt more like a critique of my mothering skills than a helpful guide. It got to the point where I dreaded family gatherings, knowing that I'd have to endure another round of her icy glares and backhanded compliments. But despite it all, I refused to let her negativity chip away at my self-esteem. I knew I was a good wife and mother, flaws and all, and while her approval would have been nice, I didn't need it to validate my worth. So, I focused on what truly mattered. My family, my happiness, and the love that Archie and I shared, shotgun wedding and all. However, things got even worse when I got pregnant with my second baby. So picture this. I'm pregnant, Archie and I are knee-deep in some serious relationship problems, and to top it all off, Ada's chilly attitude is still going strong. Now, Archie and I had our fair share of disagreements, you know, the usual stuff that crops up when two people try to navigate life together. Archie and I might as well have been speaking different languages at times. I'd try to express my feelings, he'd clam up, and before we knew it, we were knee-deep in a game of emotional charades. We'd both been burned in past relationships, and those scars had a way of rearing their ugly heads when we least expected it. It's hard to let your guard down when you've been hurt before, but therapy helped us start to mend those broken pieces. Between work, household chores, and the general chaos of everyday life, it felt like Archie and I were ships passing in the night. We'd become experts at coexisting, but somewhere along the way, we'd forgotten how to truly connect. And with a kid and another on the way, we were also under a lot of financial stress. Money might not buy happiness, but let me tell you, it sure can cause a whole lot of headaches. We'd argue about budgets, splurges, and long-term goals until we were both blue in the face. Enter therapy, our saving grace in the midst of the chaos. Week by week, we'd sit down with our therapist and unpack all the baggage we'd been carrying around. They helped us learn new communication strategies, rebuild trust, carve out quality time, and tackle our financial woes head-on. Over time, our financial situation also got better. Archie switched jobs and got a huge pay raise. As if dealing with our own relationship struggles wasn't enough, throwing a pregnancy and my mother-in-law's cold shoulder into the mix, and you've got a recipe for emotional overload. Every snide remark, every passive-aggressive gesture, it all felt like salt in the wound. I'd be lying if I said it didn't take a toll on me. There were days when I felt like I was drowning in a sea of negativity, struggling to keep my head above water. And with another baby on the way, the pressure felt 10 times heavier. Even after I had another baby, she would come and talk to Archie and talk to the children, but be cold to me. You'd think adding another little nugget to the family would soften her up a bit. But nope, she stayed as icy as ever. She'd breeze into our home, showering Archie and the kids with affection, while I got the cold shoulder treatment. It was like a broken record. Her nitpicking every little thing I did, from how I dressed the kids to how I folded the laundry, nothing escaped her eagle eye. And let me tell you, trying to juggle the demands of 2 little ones while dealing with her constant criticism, talk about exhausting. Archie and I were doing our best to navigate the wild ride of parenthood with 2 kids in tow. It was a whirlwind of diapers, late-night feedings, and endless rounds of peekaboo. But amidst the chaos, we found moments of joy, watching our kids grow and learn, their laughter filling our home with warmth. As for Ada, well, she seemed to have a knack for finding fault in everything I did, even when it came to raising the kids. Like the time she dropped by unannounced and caught me feeding my daughter store-bought snacks. You'd think I'd committed a cardinal sin, the way she carried on about the importance of homemade meals. Or how about the time she critiqued my choice of daycare for our eldest? According to her, I should have done more research, visited more facilities, yada yada yada. Never mind the fact that I'd spent weeks scouring the internet and touring daycare centers to find the best fit for our family. I also hated her unsolicited advice on discipline. Every tantrum, every timeout, she had an opinion on how I should handle it. It was like she thought she knew better than me, the woman who actually spent day in and day out with the kids. But despite her constant interference, Archie and I were determined not to let her negativity affect our family dynamic. We leaned on each other for support, finding strength in our love and commitment to each other. And you know what? It made us stronger and more resilient in the face of adversity. Everything took a surprising turn at my mother-in-law's 65th birthday bash, which went down just last weekend. Picture this. We're all dolled up, heading to the party, ready to celebrate this milestone moment. And let me tell you, I put some serious thought into her gift. Now, picking out a present for someone who's been less than warm and fuzzy toward you is not exactly a walk in the park. But call me optimistic, I figured maybe, just maybe, this could be the olive branch we needed to thaw out the icy vibes between us. After much deliberation, I settled on a pair of stunning diamond earrings. They were similar to a set she'd had years ago but had unfortunately misplaced. I thought, hey, what better way to show her I care than with a thoughtful gift that harkens back to happier times? So we roll up to the party, gift in hand, ready to make nice and put on a brave face. And you know what? Everything seemed to be going swimmingly. People were laughing, chatting, the whole shebang. I handed over my carefully chosen present, a smile plastered on my face, hoping against hope that this would be the olive branch we needed to mend fences. And for a fleeting moment, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, she actually liked it, But then, just as quickly as the moment came, it vanished. Her expression remained as inscrutable as ever, leaving me to wonder if I'd missed the mark once again. The rest of the party went off without a hitch, cake, candles, the whole 9 yards. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was like a cloud looming over an otherwise sunny day, casting a shadow of doubt over my attempts to bridge the gap between us. However, just when I thought everything was going smoothly, I overheard my mother-in-law, Ada, talking to my sister-in-law about how I have the habit of showing off, and that's why I gave her the diamond earrings. Her words cut deep, like a knife to the heart. She accused me of having this habit of showing off, implying that my gesture of giving her the diamond earrings was nothing more than a flashy attempt to win her favor. Ouch. Talk about adding insult to injury. Here I was trying to extend an olive branch, and she goes and twists it into something ugly and malicious. It felt like a slap in the face. To be honest, like no matter what I did, it was never good enough for her. So you can imagine the whirlwind of emotion swirling around inside me when I confronted her about it in the kitchen. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweaty. I was a nervous wreck, to say the least. But I couldn't just let her words slide. I needed to know, did she really think I was trying to show off? Was that how she saw me after all this time? It was like a dagger to the heart, hearing her words echo in my mind. And her response? Well, let's just say it didn't exactly ease my troubled mind. She brushed it off, saying something about how giving her diamond earrings wasn't the smartest move considering our financial situation. Like that was supposed to make it better somehow. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. I pressed her, asking if she truly believed I had ulterior motives behind my gift. Did she think I was trying to buy her affection, to win her over with flashy baubles and empty gestures? Or was I just trying to win over my mother-in-law? She acted surprised, saying what I meant by saying win her over? Well, things went from bad to worse real quick during that kitchen confrontation. I mustered up the courage to lay it all out there, how her constant coldness towards me had been eating away at my soul. But instead of the heartfelt apology or understanding I was hoping for, I was met with a bombshell of accusations. I couldn't believe my ears when Ada hit me with the bombshell, accusing me of trapping her son Archie. Like, excuse me? Trapping him? How? Last time I checked, it takes 2 to tango, and Archie was just as much a part of this whirlwind romance as I was. I was floored, to say the least. Trapping him? What on earth was she talking about? I demanded answers. Desperate to get to the bottom of this twisted tale she seemed to be spinning. She said she knows the truth. My mother, Jane, 63F, told her the truth long ago. I had no idea what she meant, so I pressed for more information. According to Ada, my mom spilled some sort of secret about our shotgun wedding, that I had supposedly baby-trapped Archie into marrying me by getting pregnant. And not just once, but twice. She accused me of purposely getting pregnant again when Archie and I were going through rough patches, just so he wouldn't leave me. I was floored, to say the least. It was like a punch to the gut, hearing such outrageous accusations coming from someone I thought I could trust. How could my own mother feed into such hurtful lies? And why would Ada even believe such nonsense? But despite the disbelief swirling inside me, I knew I had to set the record straight. I squared my shoulders, looked Ada straight in the eye, and told her, in no uncertain terms, that she was dead wrong. I told her how I never once manipulated or coerced Archie into marrying me. Heck, I didn't even bring up the topic of marriage after I found out I was pregnant that first time. It was Archie who made the decision to propose, not me. And as for getting pregnant again during rough patches in our relationship, that was nothing more than a cruel fabrication. Sure, Archie and I had our fair share of ups and downs, but never, not once, did I resort to such manipulative tactics to keep him by my side. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, fueling my determination to set the record straight. I told Ada that if she wanted the truth, she could ask her own son. He would set her straight, no doubt about it. I called Archie to the kitchen and told him everything. Archie. She couldn't believe what he was hearing. He reassured Ada, telling her that I never pressured him into marriage, that it was his decision all along. Heck, he'd made up his mind long before I even got pregnant that first time. It was a relief to have him by my side, backing me up with the truth. Ada's reaction? Well, let's just say she was eating humble pie. She realized her mistake, owned up to her misjudgment, and offered up a heartfelt apology for all those years of being cold and standoffish towards me. But even as she apologized, a knot formed in the pit of my stomach. Sure, it felt good to have her finally acknowledge her wrongs, but the damage had been done. Years of frostiness and hostility, all because of a lie spun by my own mother. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, knowing that someone I should have been able to trust had been spreading hurtful lies about me behind my back. It was like a stab in the heart, realizing that the woman who brought me into this world could betray me in such a callous way. So, even as Ada apologized and Archie reassured me, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease lingering in the air. How could I move past this? How could I trust my own mother again, knowing that she'd been the source of so much pain and heartache? So, I decided that I needed to see my mother immediately. I sent Archie and the kids packing, hopped into a cab, and made a beeline for my mother's place, which was a good hour away. As I sat in the back seat, the tension in the cab was palpable. My mind was racing a mile a minute, thoughts swirling around in a chaotic whirlwind. How could my own mother betray me like this? What had I done to deserve such betrayal? With each passing mile, my anxiety only grew, gnawing away at my insides like a ravenous beast. I needed answers, and I needed them now. So, I braced myself for the confrontation that awaited me, steeling my resolve as we drew closer to my mother's doorstep. When I finally arrived, I wasted no time. I barged through the front door, my heart pounding in my chest, as I confronted my mother head-on. I laid it all out on the table, recounting Ada's accusations and demanding to know the truth. At first, my mom tried to deny it, brushing off my concerns with a dismissive wave of her hand. But when I pressed her, refusing to back down, the truth came tumbling out like a dam bursting under the weight of years of deception. She confessed that, yes, she had indeed told Ada those hurtful lies about me trapping Archie into marriage. According to her twisted logic, Archie was too good for me, and the shotgun wedding was the only way I could ever hope to settle him down. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. How could she say such hurtful things about her own daughter? Didn't she realize the pain and anguish her words had caused? After my confrontation with my mother, it was clear that she wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She didn't even seem to grasp the gravity of her betrayal. It was like a slap in the face, realizing that the woman who was supposed to love and support me unconditionally could be so callous with my feelings. At that moment, I knew I had to draw the line. This was the last straw. Sure, we were never super close, but she was still my mother, and she had shattered my trust in the worst possible way. I told her point blank I was done. Done with her lies, done with her deceit, done with the toxic cycle of hurt and betrayal. I made it crystal clear that I was cutting her off, that she would never get the chance to poison my life or my children's lives with her toxic presence. It was a tough decision, but one I knew in my heart was necessary for my own sanity and well-being. Of course, she didn't take it well. She tried shouting, hurling insults my way, calling me an entitled brat and worse. But I didn't stick around to listen to her tirade. I had said my piece, and now it was time to walk away. When I got home, the floodgates opened. I collapsed into Archie's arms, the weight of the day crashing down on me all at once. I cried until there were no tears left, letting his comforting embrace wash away the pain and anguish of the day. But just when I thought maybe, just maybe, I could start to move on from the chaos, my cousin called, and let me tell you, they didn't hold back. They told me straight up that I might have been a little too harsh, that cutting my mother off from her grandchildren might be a step too far. That made me think, had I been too hasty in my decision? So, ITA for cutting off my mother because she lied to my mother-in-law about how I trapped my husband by getting pregnant? Date 1. The next day after everything happened, Ada showed up at our place with some food. I have to admit I was taken aback. After everything that had gone down, I wasn't sure what to expect from her. But there she was, standing on our doorstep, looking contrite and apologetic. She wasted no time in getting to the point, offering up a heartfelt apology for the role she played in the whole mess. She admitted that she shouldn't have trusted my mother's words so easily, that she could have saved us all a lot of trouble if she'd just seen through the lies from the start. And you know what? I appreciated her honesty. It takes guts to own up to your mistakes, and I could see that she genuinely regretted her actions. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, knowing that she finally understood the gravity of the situation. I thanked her for her apology, letting her know that while I was glad there was no more confusion, it would take me some time to fully process everything that had happened. After all, trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. A lot of people here ask me about my relationship with my mother. There is nothing much to say. Growing up, my mom was always there to provide for me. A roof over my head, food on the table, all that jazz. But when it came to the emotional stuff, well, let's just say she wasn't exactly Mother of the Year material. I guess you could say I had one of those good enough moms, the ones who do the bare minimum to keep their kids alive and kicking but don't really go above and beyond in the love and nurturing department. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for everything she's done for me. But there's always been this nagging sense of emptiness, this feeling that something vital was missing from our relationship. Maybe I was too stupid to realize it at the time, too caught up in my own little world to see the cracks forming in the facade of our family dynamic. Or maybe I just didn't want to admit that my mom wasn't the picture-perfect parent I'd always hoped she'd be. Looking back, it's easy to see the signs. The missed birthdays, the lack of affection, the constant feeling of being misunderstood and unloved. But at the time, I guess I just brushed it all off as normal. After all, isn't that what kids do? They make excuses for their parents and rationalize away their shortcomings because the alternative is too painful to bear. So no, there wasn't anything specifically wrong or traumatizing about my relationship with my mother. It was more like a slow drip of disappointment, a gradual realization that the person who was supposed to love me unconditionally just couldn't quite measure up to my expectations. But I won't let my past define me. I won't let my relationship with my mother dictate my future, because at the end of the day, I'm more than just the sum of my experiences. I'm a survivor and a fighter. Update 2. Hi guys, it's been a few weeks since my last update, and boy do I have a big update for you guys. So, remember how I told you about Ada and my mom's little tete-a-tete? Well, turns out it sparked a full-blown showdown. You see, over the years, Ada and my mom had developed this weird sort of friendship. I guess they bonded over shared interests or something, I don't know. But the point is, Ada took what my mom said about me at face value because of their so-called friendship. Anyway, fast forward to a few days ago, and Ada decided she's had enough of the lies and deception. She marches right up to my mom outside the church. Yes, you heard that right, outside the church, and lets her have it. From what I heard, it was like something out of a soap opera. There was yelling, finger-pointing, and maybe even a few choice words thrown in for good measure. Needless to say, it caused quite the scene, and pretty much everyone in our circle got wind of it. Now, you'd think my mom would be mortified, right? I mean, getting called out like that in public, talk about embarrassing. But knowing her, she probably just brushed it off like it was no big deal. As for Ada, well, I think she felt pretty relieved to finally get everything off her chest. It was like a weight had been lifted, knowing that she'd stood up for me and set the record straight once and for all. But my mom wasn't going to take it well. She didn't call or text me after I confronted her, but she did start calling me after Ada humiliated her. Suddenly, my phone starts blowing up with voicemails from her, all blaming me for her newfound misery. She went on and on about how I was ruining her life, how none of her precious church friends would even look her way anymore. But you know what? Not once did she utter a single word of apology to me. Now, normally, I might have caved and called her back, tried to smooth things over like the beautiful daughter I'm supposed to be, but not this time. No, sir. I've had enough of her lies and manipulation. So I made a decision. I'm not going to stoop to her level. I'm not going to engage in her toxic games anymore. I'm cutting her off for good, and I'm not looking back. Sure, it's a tough pill to swallow, knowing that I'll never have the mother-daughter relationship I've always longed for. But sometimes you got to put your own mental health and well-being first, even if it means cutting ties with family. Update 3. Hey folks, it's been a minute since my last update, and let me tell you, a whole lot has gone down since then. So, Remember how I said I was ready to cut ties with my mom for good? Well, turns out life had other plans for me. Just when I thought I was done with her lies and manipulation, my mom started showing signs of dementia, and let me tell you, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Here I was, ready to wash my hands of her once and for all, and suddenly, I was faced with this heartbreaking reality. As her only daughter, I couldn't just turn my back on her, no matter how much she hurt me. It was tough seeing her like that, confused, frightened, not even recognizing her own daughter. It was like a punch to the gut, knowing that the woman I once knew was slipping away before my very eyes. For a while, my cousin has stepped in to help out, staying with her and providing the care she needs. But if her condition gets worse, we will have to opt for a nursing home where she can get full-time care. So, as I stand on the brink of this new chapter in my mom's journey, I can't help but feel a mix of emotions. Sadness, yes, but also a glimmer of hope. Hope that she'll get the care and support she needs, and hope that she'll find some measure of peace and comfort in her final days. And to all of you who've been following along on this roller coaster ride with me, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your kind words, your support, and your encouragement. It means more to me than you'll ever know. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, this new chapter will bring with it a sense of healing and closure for me, for my mom, and for our entire family. Here's to hoping. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My ex-mother-in-law tried to take my house. She got what she wanted. So to start off, this all happened many years ago, but I made some comments on my main account and someone said they wanted to hear more of the story. My MIL was not as bad as some of yours, but she still was something special. Many moons ago, I met what I thought would end up being my lifelong partner. We dated for a while before he popped the question, and even though it had only been 6 months, everything felt right and I went ahead with accepting his proposal. Now, at this point, I'd never met his mother, and it was mainly due to distance. I met my then husband while we were both finishing college some 7 hours from his hometown. So while we'd spoken briefly on the phone, I hadn't met his mom in person. She seemed nice enough though, always had good things to say, although years later looking back, I realized it was always generic, like you could almost read the same nice things she said on Hallmark greeting cards. She overall seemed happy that he was happy though, so I always ignored any weirdness while we were dating. After we graduated, we moved together to a large city about an hour from where his parents lived. I started working immediately as a courier, which I enjoyed as I never wanted to be stuck in an office and it let me get used to the city layout. In the first weeks we lived there, I would be sent out to take documents between legal offices, medical offices, wherever it was necessary, and one day one of the deliveries took me into an upscale neighborhood to deliver a packet of paperwork to a lawyer. The delivery was uneventful, but leaving the neighborhood, I seen a for sale sign and I remember it all so clearly, because that was the day I found my dream home. Something to know, and part of the reason I created a throwaway account, is that I was orphaned as an infant and left with an extremely large inheritance. My parents, while only in their mid-20s when they had me, had the forethought to set things up in case anything happened to them, and they died when I was only a few years old. They'd inherited a lot of money when their parents died before I was born, and had an extremely successful business before a car crash took them both. To put it simply, I wouldn't have to work a day in my life if I didn't want to. My college was paid for, I had not a single dollar of debt, and enough to live on was given to me every month by an auto deposit. But at the time most of my funds were locked up in trusts until I turned 30, at which point I would receive everything. My at the time fiancé, while aware I had money from my deceased parents, had no idea the amount, and I had a long talk with him that same day as I sought to pull some of my trust early to buy the house. He was surprised, not upset, but not expecting it when I showed him the proof. It took a while to get the paperwork done and everything sorted with the lawyer, but I secured the money from my trust and bought the house after 2 months of us living together. Then his mother declared that she wanted to visit. She hadn't seen her baby boy in almost a year, and she wanted to see what kind of life he was leading. We agreed to take care of driving and picking her up to go to dinner in our city. His mom, while pleasant and soft-spoken on the phone, turned out to be a chatterbox when we went to pick her up. She gushed over how pretty I was, that her son had finally found someone acceptable, and that she couldn't wait to see the cute little starter home we bought. It was a long ride as she went on and on about the things my fiancé had done growing up, the things she hoped he'd be able to accomplish, the dreams she knew he had. It was a little awkward. I barely got a word in edgewise, and my fiancé looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him up, but stayed silent as he drove us. Dinner was nice. She was quiet half the time as we were eating, and we made polite conversation at an upscale restaurant. I still remember the surprise on her face when I asked the waiter for the bill and a comment about how it was great I was treating him to dinner for a change. I didn't say anything. My fiancé looked ashamed of her for a second, but we quickly moved on, and I didn't want to ruffle any feathers on the first night I'm meeting my fiancé's mother in person. It was during this night as well that I noticed something I would never forget about his mother, and that was that she didn't seem to realize I was the main handler of our finances. We left the restaurant and the drive to our house was pleasant. We talked about the surrounding area, and she commented on the upscale neighborhoods we started driving through. I'll admit, I took a small amount of satisfaction when she got quiet as he slowed down and pulled up the driveway to our house. Once we got inside and she realized the inside was as nice as the outside, she took a seat at the bar, and the conversation started up again. Not really though, since it was mostly her talking and us nodding and listening as she droned on. She made comments about him buying the car, him paying for our vacations in the future, and she even insinuated that he financed our house. I let it slide. I was never one to flaunt my wealth, and she, I think, took that as a sign that she was right, but I didn't correct her. The night ended with her being slightly drunk, telling us stories of when fiancé was a baby, and eventually he coaxed her into the car to take her home. By the time he got back, I was asleep, and while we didn't really talk much about the visit, he apologized for some of her comments, and we agreed it would never be a regular thing to have her over. The next few years of her in our lives revolved around, apart from her constant backhanded compliments, her second-guessing every single thing he paid for. Ever he knew I was private about my finances, he never told her anything apart from that we were handling things as a couple, and I didn't really care if she wanted to delude herself, so we let it go. We were going to get married in the summer 3 years after we got together, and it was only months before I was to marry that I found out I was infertile 100%. I would never have children and actually had to have my ovaries removed due to them being deformed. He still wanted to be with me despite also wanting children, so we stayed together. If you made it this far, congrats, because you now get to the good part. I was making breakfast. It was a weekend, and he was in the backyard in the garden when his phone pinged a text. It was from his mom, and she was asking, "When are you getting the pup?" I was shocked, to say the least, and when I questioned him, he was also visibly surprised that she'd brought one up. We'd not discussed one. I had no intention of ever leaving him as long as he remained the man I fell in love with, and he had no money that he knew of that needed protected. He called her, didn't tell her I was in the room, and it was like she was an entirely different woman. He wasn't on speakerphone, but I could still hear her loudness as she proclaimed I was out for his money. He was barely able to speak as she ranted that he bought me a house and cars and given me tons of money to live on, and she demanded he protect the family money in case we got divorced. He eventually got her off the phone shouting over her that our finances were none of his business and he'd handle himself however he seen fit. It didn't stop though. Every day for the next week, she hounded and harassed him about protecting his future in case I decided to take everything and leave him high and dry. It got even worse when his mother discovered I was barren. I don't even know how she found out, as myself and my husband were the only ones who knew, and he never told her. Just out of the blue, she started including in her vitriolic rants that I was intentionally making myself infertile so I could keep all the money to myself and not have to share with future children. It hurt. He could see it hurt, and I've never seen him so furious with someone. That particular phone call ended with him screaming that he never wanted to hear from her again, and her wailing that I was taking him and everything else away from her. To put it mildly, I was done with her antics, and she was uninvited to the wedding. He explained it to the rest of his family, leaving out any mention of my wealth, and they all turned on her for the things she'd said. I'd met the rest of his family slowly over the years, and they'd all liked me, his mother seeming to be the only one with a problem. When we got married, it was a little over a month after we originally wanted, but we just told everyone we dragged our feet a little on the booking of the venue. His mother did not attend, but the rest of his family did, and were all happy for us. We spent a few happy years together, barely hearing from his mother. As we approached 30 though, I found myself more and more okay with not having children, whereas my husband wanted a couple. We got counseling, we talked endlessly, and after a heartbreaking months of towing the line, we amicably decided to divorce. He wanted kids and I didn't. There just wasn't a way to compromise on that. We announced it to his family together. Many tears were shed by all, but it was overall probably one of the most peaceful divorces you could ever see. It only took 2 days for his mother to show up on my doorstep with the sheriff, while hubby was at work. I was flabbergasted when I opened the door. I was wide-eyed and had no idea what to do, but the sheriff stepped forward and handed me a piece of paper. I have to admit, when I read the bold print at the top while she smugly watched me, I ended up laughing out loud, like almost doubled over and laughing so loud the poor officer probably thought I was insane for a second. I looked at her, still laughing, as she looked angry and confused, and addressed her directly for the first time in almost half a year. "Mael, are you seriously trying to evict me from my own home?" That's right, she had handed me an eviction notice. I handed it back. The sheriff asked him to please stay where he is and shut the door before she could respond. I don't know what she said, but her wailing could be heard loudly and clearly as I walked through the house to my office. When I went back out, I handed the sheriff the deed to my home, and he looked it over while she looked over his shoulder. The sheriff did not look amused as he glanced towards her multiple times. In my county at the time, you had to have a law enforcement officer sign off that an eviction notice had been delivered in person before you could actually take a tenant to court to fully evict. So basically, whatever she thought she was doing, what she was actually doing was wasting this guy's time with whatever lie she told to get him here. He hands me back the deed, rips the eviction notice in half, and starts questioning why she thinks she can just evict the owner from their own home. "You need to get out. Get out of my son's house." She shouted that and other incoherent things at me instead, and I rolled my eyes, almost amused still, and stepped inside while the sheriff started giving her a talking down. I left the door slightly open, but she didn't try to come in, nor did the sheriff, as I went ahead and texted my husband to let him know what is happening, while going back to my office. When I emerged once more, the sheriff had a look on his face of someone who was absolutely done. But I was as well, and I'd already decided to burn this last bridge. See, the real reason our wedding was delayed was because we'd moved the date to see a lawyer. "I'm not leaving my house, but I will give you one thing that'll make you happy," I told her as I opened the door, and she looked uncertain, but didn't want to say too much with an officer of the law standing right next to us. "We got that prop you wanted. Do you want to read it?" She practically tore the papers. She snatched them from my hand so fast, and she looked so pleased with herself up and until it got to the point of splitting assets. To put it simply, everything attained while already married was split 50-50ths. Everything from before marriage was to be treated as though we were never married. "What the game are you playing at?" she demanded, clearly pissed, and I decided to hand her the single piece of paper in my other hand. She snatched it too, and as she pieced together in her mind what this all meant, she actually went pale. "You?" She didn't finish the statement. She was shaking. She was speechless. I think she was furious. The sheriff was looking like he wanted to take a nap. I took my papers back, asked the sheriff to escort her off my property, and closed the front door. Apparently it became the hottest family gossip, because not long after texting my husband, "The cat is out of the bag," he started getting calls from his family while he was still at work. Many begging him to reconsider leaving me, many telling him to do what he wants, and the majority condemning his mother. After getting the full story, his family kept her at bay while we went through with divorce, as apparently she was beside herself and believed she was the downfall of our marriage. One of his aunts remarked that she was distraught that she'd made her son give up a fortune. It didn't matter that my money was an inheritance and untouchable to him even without the prenup. She was certain he could use it however he wished as long as we were married. I learned many years after we divorced, when his mother passed away, that she'd had mountains of debt. No one knows why she pushed so hard on that prop. I stayed friends with my ex and am with someone else for the past few years. We even go out occasionally with ex, his wife, and their kids. He's had happy. I'm happy. Now on to the next story. Story 8. I abandoned my pregnant girlfriend 28 years ago. Now my secret son has found me and my family is falling apart. But that's not even the biggest shock. I never thought I'd be in this situation, but here I am. I'm Jack, 52M, a construction worker, and I've been married to my wife, Sarah, 49F, for 25 years. We have 2 children together, Emily, 22F, and Max, 19M. Our life was pretty normal until about 5 years ago when I found out I had a son from a previous relationship. To understand how I got here, I need to go back to the beginning. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the youngest of 4 boys. My dad was a factory worker and my mom stayed at home. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I was always the rebel of the family, constantly getting into trouble and pushing boundaries. When I was 18, I decided I'd had enough of small-town life and moved to the city. Those first few years were tough. I bounced from job to job, barely making enough to pay rent, but I was young and free, and I loved every minute of it. That's when I met Olivia, 23F at the time. She was the waitress at the diner where I'd grab breakfast before my shift at the construction site. She had these bright green eyes and a laugh that could light up a room. We hit it off immediately. We dated for about 6 months, and it was intense. We were young, carefree, and madly in love, or so we thought. Looking back, I realized it was more infatuation than love. We were both running from our pasts and found comfort in each other. Then came the night that changed everything. Olivia told me she was pregnant. Panicked. I was 24, barely making ends meet, and suddenly faced with the prospect of being a father. I did the worst thing possible. I ran. I told Olivia I couldn't support her or the baby, packed my bags, and left town the next day. It's the biggest regret of my life. I tried to forget about Olivia and the baby, throwing myself into work. A year later, I met Sarah. She was different from anyone I'd ever known, kind, patient, and grounded. She helped me grow up to become a better man. We got married after 2 years of dating, and I thought my past was behind me. Sarah and I built a good life together. I worked my way up in construction, eventually becoming a site manager. Sarah pursued her passion for teaching, becoming an elementary school teacher. We had Emily when I was 30, and Max came along 3 years later. Life was good, and I was happy, but my past was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Every year on what would have been my child's birthday, I'd find myself wondering about them. Were they healthy? Happy? Did they hate me for abandoning them? I never told Sarah about it, afraid it would ruin what we had built. Then 5 years ago, everything changed. I received a Facebook message from a young man named Ethan, 23M. He claimed to be my son and wanted to meet me. I was shocked and scared, but I agreed to meet him. When I saw him, there was no doubt he was my son. He had my eyes and my smile. Ethan told me that Olivia had raised him as a single mother. She had moved back to her hometown in Indiana where her parents helped her raise Ethan. She never married, dedicating her life to her son. Ethan spoke of her with such love and admiration that it made my guilt even worse. He told me she had passed away a year ago from breast cancer. In her final days, she told Ethan about me and gave him some old letters and photos. He had spent the last year piecing together who I was and gathering the courage to reach out. I was overwhelmed with guilt and shame. That night, I told Sarah everything. I expected her to be furious, to throw me out, but she surprised me. She was upset, yes, but more than that, she was compassionate. She held me as I cried, apologizing over and over for keeping this secret. We stayed up all night talking, and by morning we had agreed that we should try to get to know Ethan. We invited Ethan over for dinner to meet the family. I was a nervous wreck that day, pacing the house and checking the clock every 5 minutes. Sarah was calm as always, preparing a feast and assuring me everything would be okay. When Ethan arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Emily, always the social butterfly, tried to break the ice with questions about Ethan's life and interests. Max, on the other hand, was sullen and quiet. He barely spoke during dinner and left the table early. Sarah kept things going with pleasant conversation, but I could tell she was struggling too. Over the next few months, Ethan became a regular part of our lives. He'd come over for Sunday dinners, and we'd catch up on lost time. I learned that he was studying to be an engineer and working part-time at a local bookstore. He was smart, kind, and everything I could have hoped for in a son. He told me about his childhood, about Olivia's struggle as a single mother, about his dreams for the future. With every story, my admiration for Olivia grew, as did my regret for not being there. But as Ethan and I grew closer, I noticed my relationship with Max deteriorating. He became distant and argumentative. When I tried to talk to him about it, he accused me of replacing him with Ethan. I assured him that wasn't the case, but he wouldn't listen. Max had always been a sensitive kid, more interested in art and music than the sports and outdoor activities I enjoyed with Emily. I realized with a pang that I had never really known how to connect with him, and now he felt like he was losing me to a brother he never knew he had. Sarah was also struggling. She put on a brave face, but I could tell she was hurting. She'd sometimes leave the room when Ethan and I were talking about his childhood, and I'd find her crying in our bedroom later. One night, she confessed that hearing about Olivia made her feel insecure, wondering if I had settled for her after losing my true love. It broke my heart to hear her doubt herself, and I spent hours reassuring her that she was the love of my life. Emily, surprisingly, was the one who adapted the best. She and Ethan hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared love of books and travel. She would often invite him to her college campus, proudly introducing him as her big brother. Her acceptance was a bright spot in the otherwise turbulent situation. Things came to a head last week. We were celebrating Ethan's 28th birthday at our house. The whole family was there, including some of Ethan's friends. Max showed up late, clearly drunk. He stumbled into the living room and started yelling at Ethan, calling him an intruder and accusing him of ruining our family. I tried to calm Max down, but he pushed me away. He stormed out of the house, nearly hitting Sarah's car as he sped away. Ethan was mortified and left shortly after, despite our protests. The party disbanded quickly after that, leaving Sarah and Emily in tears and me feeling like I had failed everyone. The next day, I tried to talk to Max, but he wouldn't answer his phone. Emily told me he was staying at a friend's house and didn't want to talk to me. Ethan called to apologize, even though none of this was his fault. Sarah was quiet, lost in her thoughts. Now I'm torn. I love all my children, but I feel like I'm destroying my family by trying to make up for my past mistakes. Max won't return my calls. Emily is caught in the middle, and Sarah is becoming more distant every day. I don't know how to fix this. I can't abandon Ethan again, but I can't lose my family either. How do I balance being a father to all my children without hurting anyone? Has anyone been in a similar situation? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their advice and support. It's been a challenging time, but we're slowly making progress. After the disastrous birthday party, I knew I had to take action. The first thing I did was reach out to Max. He ignored my calls and texts for a week, but I kept trying. I even went to his friend's house, but he refused to see me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he agreed to meet me at a local diner, the same one where I used to meet Olivia all those years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I saw Max, my heart broke. He looked tired and defeated, with dark circles under his eyes, and his usual neat appearance disheveled. We sat in silence for a while, both of us staring at our untouched cups of coffee. Finally, he spoke. He told me he felt like he was losing his place in the family, that Ethan was the son I always wanted, smart, into sports, studying engineering. He felt like he could never measure up. As I listened, I realized how much I had missed. Max talked about feeling pressured to live up to Ethan's accomplishments, about his struggles in his art program at college, about feeling like he was disappointing me by not being more masculine. He admitted that he had started drinking more, trying to numb the pain and insecurity he felt. When he finished, I apologized. I told him that I had been so focused on making up for lost time with Ethan that I neglected to consider how it was affecting him and the rest of the family. I assured him that he was irreplaceable and that I loved him just as much as I always had. I told him how proud I was of his artistic talents, even if I didn't always understand them. We talked for hours, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. After our talk, Max agreed to come home. We had a family meeting, minus Ethan, where everyone got a chance to express their feelings. Emily admitted she felt guilty for being excited about Ethan when the rest of the family was struggling. She had always wanted a big brother, and Ethan filled that role perfectly, but seeing Max's pain made her question whether she had the right to be happy about the situation. Sarah's confession hit me hard. She told us that she felt like an outsider in her own home sometimes, especially when Ethan and I talked about his childhood. She admitted to feeling jealous of Olivia, even though she knew it was irrational. The idea that there was this whole life I could have had, this other family, scared her. She was afraid of losing me, of being second best. We decided to set some boundaries. We agreed that Ethan would come over once a week for dinner rather than multiple times a week. We also planned some one-on-one activities. I'd go to an art gallery with Max, help Emily with her job search, and Sarah and I would have a weekly date night. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. I then met with Ethan separately to explain the situation. I was nervous about how he would react, afraid that he would feel rejected once again. But Ethan surprised me with his maturity and empathy. He listened carefully as I explained the strain his presence had put on the family, nodding in understanding when I finished. He suggested that he could spend some time getting to know Max and Emily individually, without me present. He thought it might help if they could form their own relationships with him, separate from me. We're taking small steps, but things are improving. Max is talking to me again, and he even asked for Ethan's advice on a school project. Apparently, Ethan's engineering knowledge is useful for some of Max's more technical installations. Sarah seems more relaxed, and we're communicating better than we have in years. Last week, she even suggested inviting Ethan over for a movie night, something that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Emily has been my rock through all of this. She's been mediating between Max and me, encouraging Sarah to open up, and making sure Ethan still feels welcome. I'm in awe of her strength and compassion. As for me, I'm learning to balance my responsibilities to all my children and my wife. It's not easy, and there are days when I feel like I'm failing miserably, but then there are moments, like when I see Max and Ethan laughing over a shared joke, or when Sarah squeezes my hand as Ethan tells a story about his mom, that give me hope. I know we have a long way to go. Years of hurt and secrets don't heal overnight, but for the first time in months, I feel hopeful about our future as a family, all of us together. I'll keep you updated on how things progress. Again, thank you all for your support and advice. This made a world of difference. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some developments. Things have been mostly positive, but we hit a significant bump in the road recently. The good news first. Our new family dynamic has been working well. The weekly dinners with Ethan have become something we all look forward to. Max and Ethan have been getting along better, bonding over their shared interest in video games. Last month, Ethan even attended one of Max's art shows, proudly telling everyone that his little brother was the artist. The smile on Max's face when he heard that was something I'll never forget. Emily and Ethan have become close too. She even convinced him to join her volunteer group at the local animal shelter. They spend their Saturdays walking dogs and playing with cats, often coming home with stories that have us all laughing at the dinner table. Sarah has been more comfortable with Ethan's presence in our lives. She and I have been going to couples counseling, which has helped us communicate better and work through her feelings about the situation. Last week, she surprised us all by asking Ethan to teach her how to make Olivia's famous apple pie. It was a bittersweet afternoon filled with laughter and a few tears, but it felt like a turning point. However, last week we had an unexpected visitor that threw our fragile peace into chaos. Olivia's sister, Karen, 47F, showed up at our door. I hadn't seen her in nearly 30 years, and her appearance shocked us all. Karen explained that she had only recently learned about Ethan's connection to me. She had been living abroad for many years and had lost touch with Ethan after Olivia's death. When she returned and reconnected with him, she was furious to learn about my sudden reappearance in his life. Karen was angry, and rightfully so. She talked about how hard Olivia had worked to raise Ethan alone, about the sacrifices she had made. She demanded that I compensate them for years of missed child support, threatening legal action if I didn't comply. This threw our household into turmoil. Sarah was upset that this part of my past was causing more trouble. She retreated into herself, spending hours in the garden and barely speaking to me. Max retreated to his room, refusing to talk to anyone. I could hear his music blasting at all hours, a sure sign he was struggling. Emily tried to play peacemaker, but she was clearly stressed by the situation. I could see the toll it was taking on her, the dark circles under her eyes a testament to sleepless nights. Ethan, who wasn't present when Karen arrived, was horrified when he found out. He called me immediately, apologizing profusely and assuring me he had nothing to do with Karen's demands. He offered to talk to her and sort things out. I appreciated his offer, but I knew this was my mess to clean up. I contacted a lawyer to understand my legal obligations. The lawyer advised me that while Karen couldn't force me to pay backdated child support, especially since Ethan was now an adult, there could be some moral obligation to consider. This sparked a series of long, emotional conversations with Sarah. We argued, we cried, we talked in circles, but in the end, we came to a decision together. We decided to set up a college fund for Ethan. It wouldn't make up for the years of absence, but it felt like the right thing to do. We also agreed to help with any outstanding medical bills from Olivia's cancer treatment. It would mean tightening our belts for a while, possibly delaying our retirement plans, but we both felt it was necessary. When we presented this offer to Karen, she was initially resistant, but after a long conversation where I sincerely apologized for my past actions and explained how I was trying to make things right, she softened. She shared stories about Olivia and Ethan that made me laugh and cry in equal measure. By the end of our talk, she agreed to our proposal and even thanked us for stepping up. The aftermath of Karen's visit has been tough. Max is still distant, spending more time at his friend's house than at home. Sarah is struggling with the financial implications of our decision, and I can see the worry lines on her face when she thinks I'm not looking. But Ethan's reaction gave me hope. He was moved to tears when we told him about the college fund, saying it would help him pursue his master's degree, something he thought was out of reach. We're not out of the woods yet, but I believe we're on the right path. We're facing our problems head-on as a family, and that's all I can ask for. There are moments when it all feels overwhelming, when I wonder if we'll ever feel like a normal family again. But then I'll catch a glimpse of Sarah and Ethan laughing over a shared joke, or I'll overhear Max asking Ethan for advice on a girl he likes, and I know that we're going to be okay. I'll update again if anything significant happens. Thank you all for your continued support. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm happy to report that things have significantly improved in our family. The college fund we set up for Ethan has been a turning point. He started his master's program last month, and his excitement is contagious. Every Sunday dinner is now filled with stories about his classes and projects. What's more, this act seems to have finally convinced Max that Ethan isn't a threat to his place in the family. Max even helped Ethan move into his new apartment near the university, spending the whole day carrying boxes and arranging furniture. It was the first time I'd seen them spend so much time together without any tension. Emily has been thriving too. She and Ethan have become incredibly close, and she credits him with giving her the confidence to apply for a promotion at work, which she got last week. She brought her new boyfriend to meet the family, and it was heartwarming to see how she introduced Ethan as her big brother without a second thought. Sarah and I are in a much better place now. The counseling has helped us immensely, and we've rediscovered the connection we had when we first got married. We've started taking dance classes together, something we'd always talked about but never got around to. It's been hilarious and romantic in equal measure, and it's given us something that's just ours amidst all the family changes. As for Karen, she's become an unexpected ally. After our initial confrontation, she reached out to apologize for her approach. We've had several good conversations, and she shared stories about Olivia and Ethan's childhood that I treasure. Last month, she even joined us for Sunday dinner, bringing along old photo albums of Ethan growing up. It was a bittersweet evening, but it felt like a step towards healing for all of us. Last weekend, we had a big family barbecue. Everyone was there. Sarah, all 3 kids, Karen, and even some of Ethan's friends from his master's program. As I stood at the grill watching my family laugh and talk, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. Max was showing Ethan and Emily his latest art project on his tablet. Sarah and Karen were swapping recipes, and for a moment, it felt like this was how it had always been. There are still challenges, of course. We're navigating holidays and family traditions, figuring out how to include Ethan without overshadowing long-standing family customs. Last Christmas was a bit awkward as we tried to balance everything, but we're learning. We're planning a family vacation for next summer, our first with Ethan, and while it's exciting, it's also bringing up some complex emotions for everyone. Financially, things are a bit tight with helping Ethan with his education, but we're managing. Sarah and I have had to postpone some home renovation plans, and we're being more careful with our spending. But seeing Ethan thrive in his program makes it all worth it. I know this journey isn't over. We'll face more hurdles as time goes on. There are still days when Max gets quiet and withdrawn, or when Sarah looks at old pictures of Ethan with a hint of sadness in her eyes. I still struggle with guilt sometimes, wondering how different things might have been if I'd made different choices all those years ago. But I'm no longer afraid of what's to come. We've weathered the storm and we've come out stronger on the other side. We're not a perfect family, far from it, but we're a real one with all the messiness and love that entails. Thank you all for your support throughout this process. Your advice and encouragement have been invaluable. To anyone facing a similar situation, hang in there. With patience, love, and open communication, it is possible to heal and grow as a family. Now on to the next story. Story 9. I'm 22 years old and just got the news I'm dying. I failed at life, and I'm now leaving behind a 3-year-old daughter. As the title says, last week I got the news that I am dying from lung cancer from my doctor. Turns out, smoking since I was 15 and then upping it to 3 packs each day a few years ago was a bad idea. Stupid, I know. I thought it wouldn't come so soon, though. The stage 4, and as of now I have months to live. Please don't feel bad for me. I've done nothing good in life except have my daughter. To really be sad about losing me, I have no family because I grew up in the foster system and aged out at 18. My daughter's father is in prison for serious crimes that, even if he got out, he wouldn't be allowed to be in her life. My daughter is only 3. We don't live in a good area, and when I go to work, I have to leave her with an elderly neighbor that always gets her name wrong every day. I don't want her to grow up like I did in that foster care system. I feel like it's the reason why I messed up and did nothing good with my life. Yeah, I know it's not the only reason. My own stupidity caused most of my issues, but if I just had some family or a support system to keep me in check, it could have been better. I just want to give her some chance to have a better shot than I did. The thing is, I do have an idea for who could take care of her. One of my closest friends is a coworker at my job, and she's amazing. While I'm at the bottom of the job, like if they need to lay off people, I would definitely be the first to go. She's their prized worker and makes serious bank. She has a good husband and a kid. I want to ask her if she would be okay with adopting my little girl once I'm gone, but I know it won't go well. The thing is, my coworker and her family are black, and me and my daughter are white. Like, we both have blue eyes and can't tan white. There is no way I can ask my friend to adopt my daughter and force her to deal with those kind of issues an adoption like that will bring to her family. But then that just leaves my little girl to grow up like I did in a shitty system with only a will of about $1,000 to help her and a necklace my mother had that I'm going to give her. I don't know if I should bite the bullet and ask my close friend if she is willing to take my daughter, or just suck it up and try to work as hard as I can to get as much money into my will for my girl. But either way, I failed as a mother, and that is a regret I am literally taking to my grave. Edit. Okay. I reached out to her and we were able to set up a place to meet. To some simple, cheap bakery you can eat inside. I'm going to ask her if she can adopt my daughter that way. If she says no, I can have more time to go to an adoption agency near us. Thank you for the support, everyone. Update 1. Alright, I'm back now, a day after my post. I was able to meet up with my friend/coworker, and after telling her about my diagnosis, which is something I haven't told anyone at work, I asked her if she was willing to adopt my little girl. She was shocked and tried to comfort me about my upcoming death, but she told me she couldn't give me her answer right then and there. Turns out she does want a daughter, but something happened in her second pregnancy and caused her issues. I don't feel right sharing, so she does want to consider adopting, but she first needed to talk to her husband and talk about planning if he agrees. I understood since it was a big change in their family. I said okay. And after we ate, she gave me a hug and told me she will miss me. This is embarrassing, but I actually started crying. I also started making the emails. Us/Bundy's playbook gave me this idea, and I thought it was amazing, so I created an email for my daughter and started pre-recording videos for stuff. It's nowhere near ready, but I already have some ideas and recorded some videos for her birthdays and some big life events like first crushes and prom and first job. Sad to say, but I realized planning it that most of the videos will be don't do what I did. My friend reached out to me a few days ago and said that after having a long talk with her husband, they both are considering it. Apparently, they do this thing where, after talking about a huge change in their lives, they'll come to something to agree on and then wait for a while, and if they're still on the same page, then it sounds like a good idea. She did tell me that it wasn't a yes, though there are some issues they want to fix first. She said that while they both really like the idea, they barely know anything about my little girl. Her husband and 6-year-old son haven't even seen her, and while she has seen and heard about her, it's for me. So she told me about a plan they came up with for the rest of this month. I'm gonna have to get up 2 hours earlier than normal to drop off my daughter at their house, so her husband can watch over her as he works at home. Then I'll go to work with my coworker. This way, her husband and son can get to know her. She also said she wants us to celebrate Christmas with them, so that's something to look forward to in the future. I've already done it yesterday, and when I went to go pick up my little girl, she was the happiest I've ever seen her in a long time. My friend's husband said that they went off on the wrong foot in the start. He said she was really scared sometimes and didn't want to play with their son yet, but since it was their first day, he thinks she'll get better. We did it again today, and he said she mostly watched their son play, but it was already better than yesterday. So that's what's happening right now. I'm scared this will be for nothing, but at the very least, now my daughter is getting better at their house for now, so even if they say no in the end, she already has some better memories than when she was with me. Update 2. I'm back again. I'm sorry for being gone so long. A lot has happened, and this will be my last post, so this is going to be long, sorry. First, I started feeling real sick days after Christmas. My whole chest was hurting like someone was hitting it with a hammer over and over, and I was coughing up blood. My best friend was terrified that I caught something because the doctors have said that me getting sick right now could be deadly, so we had to go to the doctor. Thankfully, I didn't get anything. It was the symptoms getting worse. Also, thankfully, at the time I was still at work, so I didn't have to pay much for the bills. Yeah, that was another terrible thing that happened to me recently. After that trip to the hospital, my work called me in privately. Remember how I said that if something were to happen, I would be the first to go? Guess what? The bosses were telling me how they couldn't keep me there as I'm dying because it wouldn't feel right, and how it's apparent to them my illness was slowing me down and forcing my coworkers to work harder to make up for me wouldn't be fair and all that. I know I was just causing more problems to my coworkers since I got diagnosed, but I didn't think they would complain about me to my bosses. I'm so stupid for that. Of course, I was being a pain. I was hoping to still be with them to the end of the month so I could pay my apartment rent, and I had barely enough money for bills, rent, groceries, public transport, and hospital bills. This is where my best friend/former coworker comes in. After testing out caring for my little girl for a few weeks and spending a big holiday with them, she and her husband agreed to adopt her. She was telling me about some of her plans, and I told her it would probably be for the best that my daughter moves in with them. She asked me why, and I told her our work fired me, and I wouldn't be able to care for both of us with so little money. She told me we both could move in with them. They have plenty of guest rooms I could pick. I swear I tried to say no. Her family was already doing so much for us. I felt like this was too much. She told me I could be a huge help for them living there during my last months. Her husband could use the help looking after her as he works. I can help them decorate and fix up her new room, show them the foods my daughter likes to eat. So I promise I'm not going to be a bother to them, and we are hard at work getting the needed papers together for the adoption after I'm gone. Besides, me living there could help my little girl become more comfortable in her new home. And guess how rich her family are? They have a personal family lawyer. When I haven't been feeling sick, we've been working with him to make sure the adoption goes through okay. After all of that, I do want to share some other fun news. Christmas with them was probably the best Christmas my daughter and even I've ever had our entire lives. My friend's family had like 5 Christmas trees in their entire house. Thanks to my friend, I was able to make a really special Christmas gift for my daughter, a Build-A-Bear. Well, it was really a bunny, but still. I made a voice recording telling her how much I love and will always try to keep her safe. And my friend knows about the emails. I'm almost done with him, actually, just a few more left. I gave her the password to both the email and this Reddit account, so once I pass, she could delete this one. Sorry, but I've been getting so much messages. I don't want people to message me when I'm gone. And about the messages, I've gotten a lot since I updated. Apparently, my story was shared on TikTok. That's cool, it's weird. I've gotten so many people reaching out to me and messaging me wanting to talk. I've never had that happen in my life. It's funny how it happens once I'm dying. Saying how, if my friend said no, they would love to adopt my little girl. Thank you, but thankfully my friend did say yes. But if you still want to adopt, please reach out to a foster care system in your state. There are still children struggling in the system going through what I did. Give those kids the life I could never have. I've also had some saying how they would love to pay me money to help. Please don't bother, sorry, but it feels weird accepting money. My whole life I've worked for everything I've had. So it feels wrong accepting money and help from strangers just because I'm dying. I do want to address a few messages I've gotten about race. Most were about why I cared about my friend's family and me and my daughter's race being different. It wasn't a lot, but a few called me a racist for caring about that. I want to say that my nerves about that isn't because I think me and my daughter being white makes us better than my friend. Far from it. I've seen a lot of stuff in the system and talked with other kids of different races, and those kids of different races were put into care with people who were also a different race from them. They would tell me the problems they faced from the parents, not that I'm scared my friend will do that, but also from the outside world, being called names and insulted. One kid told me how she got screamed at by some older lady at a restaurant, and the parents did try to get involved, and it got into a nasty fight. So yeah, I was scared her family and my daughter would face the same bigotry the foster kids I knew from before faced. But I can't let my fears about some bigots ruin my daughter's chances. Anyways, this will be the last time I'm going to probably post on here. I don't want to waste my last days. I've thought about taking up painting again, actually. I used to paint when I was in high school before I was dropped out. And once in the same school, we've read a classic book about a world where books are banned. I don't remember a lot from the story, but I do remember at the ending when a character said you didn't waste life when you make something to leave behind. That always stuck with me. I want to paint something, maybe my friend could hang it up or keep it in their attic. But as long as I've left something behind, my life wasn't for nothing, right? I also need to help my friend's family and my daughter settle into their new lives. Thank you to everyone for your kindness and goodbye. Additional info. Her father is in prison for a hopeful very long time because he did a crime involving children. So even if he got out, he would not be allowed around her, not like I would want him to. My parents are dead. My husband is angry that we are having a girl instead of a boy. I am 13 weeks and 5 days, and we had our first trimester SC training last week with a NIP test. We sprang for all the genetic testing, and this morning they called and told us everything was normal and we're having a girl. I am elated. I didn't have a gender preference. I think all genders have their pros and cons, and children are going to be who they're going to be. I guess I'm more excited for the closure that, during a time when so much is up in the air, we have an answer to one of the biggest questions we have. I told my husband, and he was happy at first but said he was a little disappointed because he wanted a boy. But as the day goes on, he's telling me he really wanted a boy more intensely than he was letting on throughout the pregnancy. Like, he would make little jokes about manifesting that the baby is a boy and telling people that he wants the baby to be a boy. He's reading all these articles online about gender disappointment that say what he's going through is normal, but his gender disappointment goes deep. For instance, we live in the southeastern US, and he's afraid that our daughter will get some subpar healthcare, which is a very reasonable thing to worry about, as well as what if she's LGBTQ+ and she will be mixed race white/black and will face discrimination for that too. But then he said he was afraid she will get predated upon, and I said it was a possibility with a boy too. And then he said that he feels less of a bond with our daughter because of sexist stereotypes on his part. Like, what if she likes clothes shopping? I hate clothes shopping and you have to teach a girl how to be modest and I can't teach her how to pee. I told him kids are going to like what they like. You can get a girl who likes trucks and a boy who likes to paint his nails. You can influence that to an extent, but kids are going to be who they're going to be. He also said that girls are harder to raise, and it's unfortunate timing that our 12-year-old niece that we take care of got a call home from the principal right as he was saying that. I said, I don't know if girls are so much hard to raise as our niece is hard to raise. We have a small sample size and that's just bad science LOL. He then said that he was hoping for a boy because he wanted to be a better father to his son than his own deadbeat father was, and he was slightly insecure about his own masculinity and wanted a son to prove that he could be masculine and raise a masculine son. I said he should unpack that in therapy. He has an IST he sees once a week on Thursdays. Have any of y'all dealt with this? I searched the subreddit, but most of the gender disappointment posts were from the pregnant people themselves or relatives' SLF friends' gender disappointment, but not the spouse. I like the advice that he'll feel differently when he holds her for the first time, but that's 6 months from now, and I got to live with him that whole time LOL. I am trying to not let him ruin my day/excitement, but it's tough. Update 3. 7 months later. Long story short, in September I gave birth to our daughter, and he is so in love with her, it's not even funny LOL. Some things I think helped with his initial gender disappointment. He chose her name, like some of you said. His therapist helped him realize that his anxiety was less about our daughter's gender itself, and more about his anxiety at impending parenthood. Knowing our daughter's gender made the pregnancy real for him. He was freaking out because he knows what it's like to be a boy, but a girl is the unknown of a gender he doesn't know how to be on top of the unknown of parenting, if that makes sense. He got over himself about his interest not being girly and therefore having nothing in common with her, because she's a baby. Her interests right now are shapes, colors, and my boobs. Why it took the birth of his baby girl for him to realize this, when he's been married to me, a girl who shares his interests for 8 years, well, we will never know. My niece is still difficult to raise LOL, but he has the sense now to realize that she or his tumultuous relationship with his sister or his mom is not indicative of all girls/women. I should send his therapist flowers. A point of clarification, when he said he was afraid to have a girl because he didn't like clothes shopping, that wasn't him saying women be shopping. That was him saying he doesn't know how to shop for women's clothes. Which, fair. I've been a girl for 32 years, and I haven't mastered that. Where are all the pockets? All this to say, the gender disappointment issue ended up being that he ruined one day I had back in March of this year. He loves our daughter, does not resent her for not being a boy, and didn't leave me over his gender disappointment. I just want other parents experiencing this to know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you to everyone who weighed in. I felt really validated. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.